Mayor, you're ready? Yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the meeting to order. Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Here. That one right there.
Councilmember Dela Cruz.
Here.
Councilmember Gross. Mayor Lindsay.
Here. Yeah.
Councilmember McCormick. Councilmember
Here.
Moss.
Go like this? Here.
Councilmember Petros. Here. We do have a quorum, Mayor. Pastor Philip from the Key Biscayne Presbyterian Church will be unable to attend this evening to provide us with an invocation. If we can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, Madam Mayor, is brief comments by council.
Council members, do we have any comments?
Well, the Lighthouse Run was successfully consummated for the 40th consecutive time, the longest consecutive road race in the state of Florida. And as I have said during my welcoming remarks, the most beautiful. And I congratulate Councilmember Petros and her dog on completing the course.
Likewise.
And I want to recognize our longtime resident, who was, I think, for the first year unable to be present, who was Jim Brewster, who started it. And we thank him and thank them at all the races.
Jim and Ray Sullivan, I mentioned them at the beginning. That's right.
Thank you.
Next item,
Our next,
public comments.
our first speaker is David Rocker.
Thank you very much. I live at the Ocean Club, and in the summers I live up in Short Hills, New Jersey. Since I've come back, the two most common comments I've heard from friends and associates are, thank God we didn't get hit worse than Irma, and secondly, the traffic situation is horrendous, and it's not even high season. I'd like to offer some comments on that for your consideration. We were talking about smart lights before I left for the season up there, so it's been going on. And of course, I read the item on the article in the Islander. I know it's complex. There are multiple jurisdictions involved, but I think we can and we must do better than we are now. And I have some suggestions for your consideration. So I tried to do a little survey myself. So this is very informal. I just used the stopwatch on my iPhone. And I looked at the situation in a number of the individual lights. One of the worst lights is Key Colony. The light for Crandon lasts about 2 minutes. When it's red, of course, the traffic stopped both ways on Crandon, and cars leaving the Key Colony Mall could proceed for 30 seconds. The people leaving in the Key Colony, from the Key Colony itself, the Key Colony Mall could not exit, and they remained stopped. And then another 30 seconds took place where they could move and no one else could move. So you had 3 lanes, all of Crandon going north, all of Crandon going south, and the Key Colony, which was blocked except for the right-hand turns, while people could leave the Key Colony Mall. There were 2 golf carts. It took about 5 seconds, and there was another 25 seconds where nothing happened and the other lanes stayed pat. We could do better than that. Meanwhile, traffic backed up. This was 2 o'clock. It was not rush hour. And by the time I left, it was backed up going northbound on Crandon all the way through Sonesta. Another one is the area at Crandon where Galen and McIntyre intersect. Same type situation. When the light is red for Crandon, people on Galen can exit for about 30 seconds. There was 1 car who did that. Nobody could move on McIntyre, and there were probably 8 cars sitting there waiting to move. Then there was 30 seconds, the same time allowed for people leaving McIntyre. This doesn't make a lot of sense. I think we can do better than that. And the final comment on traffic I'd like to offer is that when there's heavy traffic going through Harbor for people going north and wish to make a left-hand turn, and that left-hand turn lane is clogged up, what happens is it fills in the second lane in the northbound lane. And any time that there is heavy traffic there, I would encourage us to have police official there making sure that that whole lane is cleared so that the both kinds of things can happen. One other quick thing is, this relates to debris removal, not on the island, not in Key Biscayne itself, but in the Crandon Park, where there are huge piles and have been since I've been back. And I don't know what I assume what jurisdiction it is, but I don't know why we can't move it, because it's very unsightly, and I would encourage everybody to take that step. One last issue is I keep forgetting the name of the mall, but the J.P. Morgan Boulangerie Mall. The parking there is a horrible situation. The parking lanes are much too narrow. Last time, and I sent the mayor a picture of my car that was sealed in by two adjacent cars. I could not get out of the lane because the parking spaces were too narrow. I had a knee replacement. I had to shimmy my way to the two cars, get myself in the back seat, and then climb over the seat so I could get my car out of there. Those lanes should be wider. We have separate lanes for golf carts. We should have separate lanes for SUVs, or we should have more wider lanes. And that's what I have to say. I thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Patrick Lynch.
Hello, Madam Mayor, members of council. Patrick Lynch, 240 Galen Drive. Thank you for your time. Just briefly wanted to follow up from the monument sign workshop last week. I know we had talked about the numbers to the Key Biscayne Express Care that we have here on the island. And someone had asked, believe it was Councilmember Gross had asked, what a good number might be, or what an increase to numbers would be, and if we had any examples. And I believe we may have provided to some members of the council. If not, I can get it to you, an example. And I just wanted to share it with you very briefly. In Miami Lakes, we have an urgent care, very similar, but provides a few more services that we opened up in fiscal year 2006. And for the first 2 years, we were seeing an average of about 22 patients a day. And we put a sign somewhat similar to what we're hoping we might be able to do here on Crandon, and immediately saw almost a 92% increase in our average daily census. So that's just one example of the effect that a sign can have that we've experienced here in South Florida. I just wanted to briefly share that with you. And then offer a humble suggestion, if there is a way, in the meantime, without upsetting the village or creating a stir, that we can find some kind of a temporary solution to make sure, again, that the residents know we're providing this health care here on the island. In the meantime, while we work on the bigger issue of how to tastefully and artfully solve some of the issues we've been talking about, overall, we're open to that. We're open to suggestions. This is really just about getting the word out and helping making sure people know how to get to us and where we are. So to the extent any of you are open to that discussion, we're happy to have that discussion as well, and we're amenable, and we really want to serve the community as best we can. So thank you for your time, and
thank
good
you
luck.
very much. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mario Garcia Serra.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Mario Garcia Serra, with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue and residents at 600 Grape Tree Drive. Here this evening representing the Gamwell and Ledbetter families, who are the owners respectively of 571 Glenridge Road and 570 Fernwood Road, the properties which have been subject of a letter of intent which we submitted to the village, and a discussion at the council about potential acquisition for use as open space. You'll remember at our the last council meeting, we had agreed for the appraisers to get together from each side and meet and discuss. They met, they spoke. There was some movement, but there wasn't an agreement necessarily as to what market value is for this assemblage of property. The one thing that I got out of that discussion is that discussion is sort of missing some very relevant and important factors and points. They're looking at it as what a theoretical buyer and a theoretical seller, arm's length transaction in the market for a single-family home would purchase those properties at. What that discussion is not taking into place are factors such as what the assemblage of the site, how much that enhances the value. Other factors such as the location between the school and Village Hall is a negative value when you're looking at it, or a negative factor when you're looking at it for valuation for single-family home purposes, where I would think it's a positive factor when you're looking at it for the uses that we're proposing to put it to here as a village-owned property. Doesn't factor in things such as open space concurrency deficit that there is and still exists in the village. We're not in compliance with the amount of open space that is required under our comprehensive plan. And most importantly, it does not factor in the opportunity cost. In other words, right now you have two willing sellers willing to act in a coordinated fashion to convey this property to the village. If it doesn't happen, there's no guarantee in the future that that opportunity will present itself again. And more significantly, there's a high likelihood that there will be further improvements to either or both of those properties, making their acquisition even more expensive than what it might be right now, especially when you consider the fact that the historical trend has always been for increased value of single-family residential property in Key Biscayne. Land and open space in particular are among the most limited resources which we have here on this island, and I think you really need to make an effort to determine the value of this land to the village, and not limit ourselves necessarily to what appraiser's valuation might be on a local market, which is not taking into consideration these factors that I just mentioned. When you think about it, all the valuable open spaces that we have now, whether it's the Village Green or 540 Crandon, I would challenge any of you probably to come up with what it was that we paid for those properties. In retrospect, I think it was well worth what we paid, and I think you have to sort of look at it in that context, not just look at it purely as what one appraisal might come up with an opinion of value for residential use. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Michelle Estevez.
Good evening, Michelle Estevez, 79A Crandon Boulevard. I'm here to speak in reference to the monument signs, and I'm requesting to council to give us some time and the opportunity on behalf of the Key Biscayne Chamber of Commerce and the business community and some condominiums. We'd like to meet and work some propositions and to present to council to submit to you for considerations. They are not intentions, at least from none of the people that I have spoken and we have spoken to, have any submission of large signs, vice versa. I think that we had been discussing something uniform, something very appealing, something very simple. Today, technology helped a lot to find locations. So apps and maybe the shopping center, we need to get together with the chamber to be more creative for people to find locations than just to keep putting these ugly, big illuminated signs on Crandon. So I'm here to request to give us the opportunity and to give us some time to present and submit to council some propositions and proposals and submissions for your consideration.
Thank you. And thank you, Michelle. And just for the sake of you and everyone watching tonight, we did have a workshop last week. I got some feedback that people just simply did not know about it. And at our last meeting, we agreed to have a second workshop towards the end of January. So we will try to notice it, widely and make sure that everyone hears about it. Please participate.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And those are all the speakers that have signed up for tonight.
Did the gentleman that just walked in?
Oh.
Fill this out, if you don't mind.
Tell us your name and your address, and then we'll give you the benefit of filling it out afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Are you a registered lobbyist?
No, I am not.
Okay.
I'm a resident.
Okay.
My name is Carlos Rivero, 251 Crandon Boulevard, apartment 205. Resident, taxpayer, and registered voter since the year 2000 in the Key. I wanted to talk about kiteboarding. I'm a cyclist, and I rarely cycle anymore because I'm terrified about the cars in the causeway and inside the Key. Many people can say the same probably about cyclists. Swimming is extremely dangerous. You can have people advocating for banning swimming or unless we have lifeguards on the beach every single moment. I'm not advocating for banning cyclists or banning cars on the causeway so that we can cycle safely or drive safely. My point is that we cannot regulate risk out of everything. Life is risky. So my point is that I don't think you can put the burden of doing something about any threats or risk that kite surfing may have on beachgoers on kiteboarding. Like our police chief said on the workshop last week, he can only enforce ordinances and laws. So if you have illegal commercial activity going on the beach, that's something he can enforce. And I believe 99% of the problems that we have with kite surfing on the beach is because illegal commercial activity. You have people teaching kiteboarding on the beach, which shouldn't be happening. So I know that we're going to have to come to some compromise on this issue. I recognize that, but I think that less is sometimes more, and that we should be very cognizant of what we do when we do it. Because, hell, we can just probably ban leaving on the key because we're a barrier island and a hurricane can wipe us out. So it's very dangerous. Let's leave the key and be done with it. So I'm exaggerating, of course, but my point is that we cannot regulate and have an ordinance for everything that is risky in our daily lives. I mean, you are the council that has a skate park in the city. I can imagine how many bumps and bruises that must have, and I applaud it. It's great, but that's part of what living on Key Biscayne is all about. So thank you very much for your time, and good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and please
And I'll
fill that
fill
out.
this out.
Yes. Do we have any other speakers? Thank you. Our public comments are now closed. And now our agenda item. For our agenda, do we have any approvals, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, or withdrawals?
I have one addition.
Yes. Yes. Gary and then John. Yes.
I'd like to give a very brief update on our beach renourishment project. Take maybe 3 minutes.
That would be item 10A4.
And I have 2 items after John.
Okay, John, please.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to defer until the December meeting, items 9E and 9F, dealing with the traffic signalization.
E and F? Okay, deferred.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
And Brett?
I have 2 items. Just want to get an update on the negotiations with our engineer for the underground utilities, and an update on where we are on the manager search as well.
That would be item 10A5 and 10A6.
And I had a resident ask for us to speak about the lack of adequate trash bins, recycle bins, and battery recycle bins.
Good one.
And I think it dovetails to some of our conversations, so if you indulge me with that, please.
That would be item 10A7.
Katie, do you want to briefly report on?
Yeah, well, can we do a report on the library initiative as well?
That would be item 10A8.
That's Frank and I together.
Any other?
I think that's it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne amending Section 10-63 definitions and Section 10-73 specific methods of construction and requirements of Chapter 10 floods relating to the village's floodplain management regulations, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for transmittal, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, if I may, it is recommended that the village council approve the attached amended ordinance on, and that's a scribbler's error on my part, second reading in regards to enhancing our higher regulatory standards in the village's floodplain management regulations. The amended ordinance is an opportunity to enhance the designated coastal A zone. Since the 5-year recertification will be conducted using the newest Community Rating System Manual of 2017, the potential exists for our current rating of 7 to be lowered and therefore reduce the current flood insurance premium discount to the village. By increasing the designated coastal A zone area, as shown in the attached Figure 1 map, I believe, additional points can be awarded.
This effort can restore some of the lost points without creating an impact and helps maintain the improvement for the village's current rating. The coastal A zone designation continues to be an attempt by FEMA to preempt the reclassification in which may eventually designate the entire village as coastal zone A. This ordinance was passed on first reading on August 29th, 2017 of this year, and I'll have Mr. Sergio Asunce come forward and answer any questions you have on this.
Brett, you have a question, please. You have the floor.
It's not a question, and I've already talked to Sergio about it as well, and I just want to bring it up to
Yes.
council as a discussion, that looking at the map, I'm a little bit concerned with the 69 acres on the Area 2 section. Because the coastal A zone, basically what it's going to do is it's going to force any new developments, any new buildings that are going on, when they get redeveloped, the underside of the structure is going to be at the base flood elevation. So, for instance, if somebody had a 3-foot beam at the bottom of their structure, a tie beam, they would have to have that starting at, in some cases, at 11 feet, in other cases, in 10 feet above sea level. I think our streets in Crandon may be around 8 or 7 feet or so. I'm not 100% sure. But what happens is that will be where it starts, and then you're going to go 3 feet up. So what I'm concerned is how our vision and how we want Crandon maybe to look in the future down the road. Are we cornering ourselves into a situation maybe that we may not want to do yet? Now, I understand that what Sergio explained to me, that they looked at this objectively and said anybody in the residential zones are not going to be included and everybody else will be, the single-family residential. But, you know, there are some areas in Area 2 that we could include, like the government buildings, the village green. There are places, but we're also looking at the churches, the institutions. We're looking at the yacht club, and I don't know what the design is in the yacht club, if it's already incorporating for this change. And we're looking at future development that could happen in our retail sectors. And if we're okay with having it lifted up at a certain height along the street with ramps and walkways and decks, that this is something that I think we have to be very careful of what we decide. I think there's two things that we're looking at. From my understanding, is that the CRS, right, which pertains to our insurance, flood insurance rate, and obviously the more that we show here would help us. But at the other end is that we are going. I think it's FEMA that's coming and going to look at where, and they're going to dictate basically where they're going to put the coastal A zone. And all we're doing is proposing, hey, we already did it. You know, why don't you take the one that we have and hope that it's adequate for them, and say, hey, you know, these guys are forward thinking, they've already done it. But if we're showing the Area 2 in there, maybe we might not want it. Maybe we leave that one out and just show the Area 1 and see what happens. And but that's my 2 cents from looking at this, from looking at the map.
That connects with one of my questions and observations too, which has to do with 1073-3A and the proposition that new construction minimum elevation is the lowest floor, but then the clause that caught my eye, which ties into what Brett was just talking about, is the bottom of the lowest horizontal structural member. And I don't know why it would need to be that as opposed to lowest floor and still be compliant with the building code. So that's my first question. And then we can talk a little bit about the policy, and I've got one text comment at 1063. Having eliminated the 600 feet inland, there is no most landward alternative. So that last clause in that definitional change is superfluous.
Okay.
Right? I'm reading that right?
I believe so, yes. That's right.
Okay. So reverting to Brett's observation, which leads me to this question, and then we can talk policy.
So the coastal A zone is an extension of what they call the velocity zone, which is wave action. We don't have a velocity zone, which is a V zone. We have a very small sliver, but it doesn't impact any development. So the coastal A zone presumably are waves that continue from the 3-foot height down to the 1.5-foot. And recent studies have shown that even that level of wave actions does affect and undermine shallow foundations. So a coastal A zone is not a flood zone. It's just a way of building buildings within that designated area. And it tends to be a little bit more elevated. Hence, instead of taking the BFE or the finished floor at the top of the slab, it would be underneath the structure to the lowest, because they want to move the building, the structural portions, out of any wave action that could come in that far inland. So that's the idea behind a semi-elevated structure in a coastal A zone. We already build our buildings using pilings, so that's kind of a given for us because of the nature of the soil conditions that we have here on the Key. So the only difference basically is where the reference BFE is taken. Normally in A zones, which is what we have today, is taken to the finished floor, the top of the finished floor. In the new coastal A zone, it would be referenced to the bottom of the structure. The structure may be 3 foot. The structure may be just the thickness of a slab. Whatever that thickness is, that's where the reference point is taken. So it does elevate the structure a little bit more than normal.
Is this, there's two parts, I'm confused about this, and probably there's 2 points of confusion. One is what you just described already promulgated in the building code?
Yes.
And secondly, inasmuch as we build on pilings, we raise up, does this standard in 10A3 cut against or require a lower benchmark than would otherwise be the case by simply approving a proper substructure in every case?
No, the structure is the same depending on where you're building the building. So if we had a significant V zone, this would be the way to build. In fact, we have found just by observation that a lot of the major condos, the newer condos, are already elevated because even though they're not in a V zone per se, they're close enough to the shoreline to understand that they should elevate their buildings. So the structure needs to be designed to stay in place, whether it's by a high wave action such as a V zone or a moderate wave action, which is a coastal A zone. Either way, the building has to be designed to stay in place and avoid the undermining of its foundation system, which could lead to the collapse of the building. But since we already build and design on pilings, for us, that is not an impact. And the reason that we chose what's delineated in the map is because it's basically all developed. And unless you go through a redevelopment and tear something down to build something new, reaching a substantial improvement limit, which is 50% of the building value in those designated areas, is not.
Well, is it superfluous text then to say, to have this alternative? If the standard is to build the lowest floor or the lowest element, structural element consistent with the Florida Building Code, do we need to elaborate in this subsection how to do that if the Florida Building Code speaks for itself?
Well, the Florida Building Code covers all the conditions. This community designating a coastal A zone is what they call a higher regulatory provision. And that's why it goes towards getting additional CRS points and towards lowering, because we're mitigating the flooding conditions on the Key. We're doing putting in higher regulatory requirements and being rated for that.
Here's where I need architectural help. I may not be expressing, I'm hung up on this.
Okay.
Obviously. I am thinking, and maybe you are too, I'm not sure, that the inclusion of this clause in A3 imposes a substructure height requirement that is unnecessary. That the building code itself and our review of plans in all cases compliant with the building code results in a minimum elevation as, to be compliant, to be approvable. And I'm wondering if this clause,
Can you just strike that clause, the or,
because this
or
clause
the bottom of
talks
the lowest
about
horizontal structure?
the lowest horizontal structural member, which to me, not being an engineer or an architect, calls into question that if there was an element in a substructure that may not be structurally necessary, but may be an element, and I'm making this up, you see where I'm going.
So let's say when you build a home right now, basically what we do is we drive piles down 30, 35 feet. And right from there, we actually excavate down into the earth, and we dig trenches all around, and we set up forms on each side, and we pour grade beams across. But those grade beams are your first horizontal structure. We're building them right now into the ground, and then what we do is we build a stem wall up, and then we pour the first floor at base flood elevation. So now, what this is telling us that if you're in coastal A, you can't do that horizontal grade beam on ground now. You can't even excavate it. You got to take the bottom of that grade beam, which typically ours are about, for a house, is about 20 inches to 24 inches deep. And you got to take that bottom all the way up to the top of where your top of your floor is going to be. Then you got to put your floor on top. So now we actually have to bring columns up, and then you have to form, and then you got to build. Now, obviously, this is not going to pertain to single-family homes, but it will to that strip of retail, and for the yacht club, and for the institutions that we have along there. And if we're brought up to that height, it increases costs for development, and we need to think about how do we want, pedestrians to flow along Crandon in future redevelopment that may happen in the future down the road. So that's what I'm more worried about. Now, the condominiums typically build up because they put parking under, they do all, and no, they don't really build, other than an entrance, everything else is pretty much built up. So, and I don't see that as a big issue on that side of Crandon.
Yeah, neither do I. And by the way, the heading of this subsection speaks to 1 and 2 family dwellings.
Yep.
So I don't know offhand why we're exempt from 1 and 2 family dwellings, where we say that that's what this applies to.
Let me make a clarification, because grade beams are not counted. Grade beams continue to be below the surface, and that's not where the elevation is taken to. So in continuing that, you have your pilings, you have your grade beams, which is going from piling to piling. From that, you usually bring up some stem walls or columns to that slab. The elevation reference is to the bottom of that slab, not the grade beams below.
Okay.
So,
I misunderstood that.
yeah,
I
so
thought
wanted
those
to
were
make
the
that clarification
horizontal
on that.
structure. I was
It is
thinking
not
grade
measured
beams.
down there. Usually the grade beams are below grade.
I don't read it. I mean, that's great to know, because
No.
otherwise what Brett just described is Monroe County architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get everything
no.
up in the air with ramps and stairs.
You may have stem walls coming up, or you may have actual additional columns, depending on the area of the building, that come up to then the habitable floor, and that's where the reference to the bottom, and the reference to the bottom of that slab is part of the definition of a coastal A zone.
Well, at the very minimum, I think the text doesn't say that, or at least it creates confusion in my layman's mind as to whether it does or doesn't. And secondly, the section heading deals with 1 and 2 family construction. So if we intend this to apply only to institutions and retail or office, it doesn't say that. I guess getting to the policy, Brett's exactly right. I mean, and we've talked about this in public repeatedly. We need to do a zoning assessment that ties into this desirable means to get ahead of FEMA and try to, lower our rating. But not at the cost, I think, of altering building standards that creates a design effect that is either premature or undesired or both. So the premature part is, if the future of the world is that we're all going to be like Alamorada, that day hasn't yet come, and hopefully it won't, because there will be other design solutions to protect the substructure. And secondly, we haven't made an assessment yet, we want to do that this year, about how we want our zoning code to read to take into account compliance with this flood ordinance and with the new building code standards. So I guess that's a way of saying I'm not feeling like the text does that.
Are you comfortable with the concept?
I was comfortable at first reading with the concept of trying to get ahead of the FEMA anticipated extension of the A zone.
Yes.
I all over that. I think that's a salutary purpose. But I'm reading this as prescribing building standards, maybe unnecessarily or prematurely or both. And maybe I'm misreading it. And
Well, we're simply designating an area of our community as coastal A zone. In order to try to get, maybe convince FEMA when they do come down in a couple of years and try to designate the whole key. Right now, the map that Miami-Dade County is showing on their GIS is that the whole key is a coastal A zone, including all residential. So we wouldn't have, if that's what was imposed upon us in the next couple of years, then we wouldn't have a choice. That's the way that redevelopment would get built. And the coastal A zone type of construction is clearly identified in the building code. We're just simply right now using our map as Exhibit 1. We're eliminating the single-family, 1- and 2-family residences for the time being.
But
it doesn't.
text is at odds with that. So
Could you work with Sergio possibly to get the text consistent with the concept and then?
This is a second reading, so if we don't do it
if we don't do it now, we're not.
Why?
Well, we can defer it to a day certain.
December 4th?
You want to defer it till December 4th and give us a chance. And Brett, and Tom was in the audience a minute ago. I don't think this works as written. And I can't fix it on the spot right this minute, but
There's
the goal
Tom.
is good. I think the text needs to be fixed.
Okay.
And maybe the fix is simply to say, to eliminate all this verbiage and say, within the A zone, construction will comply with the Florida Building Code. Standard is applied to the A zone. I mean, it could be as circular as that and still get to the same point. But I think this changes the construction standard inadvertently. But I read it that way.
Yeah, it should not. It should not.
Can I ask a quick question on the front page here, just for clarification? You have it written, or it is written, that the coastal A zone designation continues to be an attempt by FEMA to preempt the reclassification in which may eventually designate this village entirely as coastal A. I thought it was a preempt by us in order to.
Yes.
We're trying to preempt FEMA, yes, correct. Maybe it's.
By us.
So it's an attempt by us to preempt what this classification will be by FEMA.
FEMA may bring down eventually, yes.
Or to get there ahead of it.
Yeah.
It's just not written that way.
Yeah,
thank
but
you
it's
for
it's
that.
the memo.
Okay.
So let's do this. Let's work together on this.
Okay.
And we'll come back on December either 5th or 7th.
Whatever the,
Yes.
yes.
The next meeting.
Pick a date.
You said December 57?
We're going to fix
Well,
that
wait a minute.
tonight.
Do we have a date for
As
the,
long as you're going to continue it, which you can do.
We need
just
to pick it
announce the
right
date
now.
So that
That's
we don't have to re-notice everything.
do we
So we don't know the date.
do we have an idea of when we can reschedule the meeting? And let's decide it now so we can state the date. So
You think
it is set for a date certain, yes,
Is the only issue on the 7th the League of Cities dinner?
that we're hosting.
Well, if we're hosting it, we probably should go.
Right. That's the issue. If we weren't hosting it, then we'd get a hall pass.
So remind us, what prompted the change from the 5th?
A council member has a conflict and he would very much want to attend. And understandably, he thought that it would be the second Tuesday of the month, but December is an unusual month and we try to front end it because there's so many other commitments.
Well, for hosting, it's awkward to be a host and be.
But I'm not, I don't know the date. I know that our staff was contacted. I don't know the date that they were looking at. Actually, it may be on their website, but anyway.
I'm checking the website right now
Okay.
as we speak.
We
Okay, so
usually host in August. What happened?
we didn't.
We did in
Why don't you go ahead and table, why don't you table this?
Let's
We'll come back
table
to it
this.
once
Do I
we
have a
figure
motion
out
to
the date.
table?
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll table it,
Motion
bring it
carries.
back.
Thank you.
Next item, Madam Mayor, is a capital project authorizing resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, selecting Tapia Lewis M. Service Corporation for the Village Green Toddler Park Lighting Improvements Project, providing for authorization, providing for implementation, and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
Second.
Mayor and council, if I may, it is recommended that the village council authorize the manager to expend an amount not to exceed $113,628.88 to install lighting improvements at the village green playground and execute a contract with Tapia Lewis M Services Corporation. On January 24th, 2017, the village council was approached by residents requesting that the playground area be lit so that it may be easily accessible to the public during the early part of the winter months. On February 21st, 2017, the village council also authorized the village manager to issue a work order to EAC Consulting, Inc. for engineering services to accomplish this project. The village issued an invitation to bid at bid number 2017-08-09. Over 800 suppliers received the bid documents, 13 entities downloaded the bid documents, and 3 responded to the bid. The bid analysis was performed by EAC Consulting. EAC's evaluation found that Tapia Lewis M Services Corporation was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. The recommendation letter is attached as Exhibit A, and the bid is attached as Exhibit B.
Thank you. Luis, you had a question.
Yeah. I'm trying to get a grasp of this because I remember distinctly having a meeting here where we had people from the audience, and as a matter of fact, unless I'm in the twilight zone, somebody offered to give us the lighting for free. I distinctly remember that. And now we're going.
I remember that too, Lucho.
I do too.
Well, I don't remember it. We'll have to go back.
I even have a friend who's in the business who said, hey, let me know if you're going to be bidding. I said, look, somebody's doing it for free, so I don't think that we're going to be doing that.
I think they offered some of the equipment, and
Yeah, the lights.
but I don't think they offered the whole project.
Well, the lights.
No.
All the lights. They
said
to me it was clear.
in time we would provide it for free. I remember that.
Okay, Todd, didn't you speak to them directly? Do you want to, when you did not at that meeting, the person that offered it?
We need to go back to that
recorded.
meeting, look at it, find out the person, because if we're saving $113,000.
We probably won't save the whole 113,
Correct.
but we'll save a good chunk of the cost of the equipment if they're willing to.
I mean, look into it.
So let's bring it back in January.
December.
All righty.
Next item.
May I have a motion to defer the item?
Moved.
Second.
Is it possible for us to vote on authorizing John to install lights if they're donated so we can get this moving since it is dark?
I think it changes the bid significantly. You can't, it's,
Still have to go out for the
yeah.
Okay.
And we're going to have to the RFP process.
Or just negotiate a contract.
Well, let me make sure I got my marching orders correctly. I'm first reaching out to the individual that made this proposal.
Right, to see if
That proposal isn't valid, then I'm coming back to you in the first
Correct.
meeting that I can with what's
Correct.
in front of you right now.
Right.
Okay, I'm clear.
I'm
And
sorry.
it may be that only, 35,000 applies. It may be that was not his intent at all.
I'll reach out.
Find out.
I'm sorry, who made the motion to defer to
Me and
Yes.
second?
I think Louise.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving a D Squared Engineering Corporation for consulting services relating to sustainability of the village, providing for authorization and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion. Mr. Manager, if you could
If I may
please-
make the
Yes.
recommendation to approve the attached resolution authorizing me to enter into an agreement with D Squared Engineering for consulting services relating to sustainability. The Green Committee presented the sustainability plan to the Village Council in May of 2015. The plan was created to help the village and government develop and implement policies and initiatives consistent with the responsive stewardship of Key Biscayne's environmental infrastructure. D Square's goal over the next year is to work on 3 components of the village's sustainability plan: energy conservation, waste reduction, reuse and recycling, and the green building. D-Square will be conducting baseline analysis in all 3 target areas. The digital dashboards will be established to track key performance indicators. What you have in front of you is a hard copy of the first sustainability report from D-Square. This D-Square report is also digital, and we added, as the recommendation from Derek came forth, we added the link to the website, which will keep what you receive in hand be available to all community and residents of the community, just by going to the website and clicking on the link. So we've, almost in a dashboard fashion, we've moved very quickly in the first 3 weeks that we've had this, we're approved to do this by the budget process.
Yeah.
And then can you speak to the fact that we'll be getting updated or monthly reports on our progress on these objectives and
I'm
how
sorry.
we can see them and how the community can see them?
Okay. The link is on the webpage, and they'll be able to go to that as soon as we update it. Everything that we are doing is being put on that link.
Okay.
And there will be reporting to council. Derek's been told that we meet on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, and he's to have a monthly report to us for that meeting. So you'll have hard copy. Any entries will be made onto the website, and the website is open to everybody in the community just by going to the Key Biscayne website.
It's a dashboard on our website.
Correct me? Right?
Yes. Thank you. Brett?
Would it be proper to actually adopt the resolution that came before us with the sustainability plan? I think it was only accepted, but it's never been formally brought in, or does it matter?
Do you remember? I think it was.
It was accepted. It was never approved by Reso. No.
I would like to do that. I guess we'd need to bring it forward as an action item subsequently, but I'd like to do that.
Why don't we do it since we have
I think people need to see it and see if they want to accept it or adopt it. It may be that it's obsolete. There were certain, I mean, there was a will of the council to accept it and not adopt it, and so I think we all need to take a look at it and analyze it and see if that's the direction if that's still the direction we want to take, or whether we want to take a different direction.
Could we get that sent to everybody, and then at the next meeting, let's put it on as a item, and let's see if we want to adopt it or not.
Sure.
Or if we want to make amendments or changes to it, and then adopt it.
Or start a green committee, and that would be their starting point to then take to a different direction, or whatever. It's pretty old. It may be obsolete. Yes.
Myra?
Yes.
Wasn't Derek the chair of that committee and instrumental in the report? So maybe we could allow him to try to update it, and given this part of this,
I don't think
what's before us, or not?
Why don't we look at the report before we make that determination?
Let's do that. And I appreciate, that's a good suggestion. I mean, I think one thing I like about this is it's specific, it's pertinent, it's action items, they're measurable, they're reportable. And one of the challenges in the plan, in the sustainability plan, is it's much about aspirations, values.
It was, and yeah, there weren't that many action items that we could implement. There was a lot of.
My recall was I made a recommendation when we presented the report to allow me to go ahead and do the first. We had identified throughout the entire report about 25% of what I was calling at the time the low-hanging fruit. They were policies. There was no costs involved, and I was therefore given direction, because there was no money involvement, to move in those directions, which is how we got to where we are. But I still, as we sit here now, fully support the entire document that was submitted, and we will get that to you, and I'll make another recommendation after you all have a chance to review it.
That's great.
And I think, Vice Mayor, you said it correctly. The plan is really just setting our values, and I think it's good to have clear values while we have a consultant that's going to be starting to implement it. I don't know if it needs to go to a committee. It might be something that we can just make adjustments to what we think is valuable and adopt it.
Oh, agreed. I just think we should read it before we.
Sure. Yeah. No. I think for sure everybody should read it. I will.
Well, let's get it on the agenda, and we'll do
Could
it.
Yes, Allison.
Could I ask a question about the selection of this one consultant? Are we not looking to anyone else to submit? I mean, I know we've all seen wonderful things from them, but I feel that that's all I've seen. Are we all okay with that? I know we budgeted to hire someone, but I thought that we would solicit other entries too.
My recall is at the presentation I made at the budget hearings for this pilot program this was something that we had been submitted a proposal last year. It was in the neighborhood of twice as much. They continued doing things on a voluntary basis, and I brought forth to council what I thought was a sole source provider only based on the fact that he was already doing the things for us, and this was a pilot program. If council during the next budget hearing chooses not to go forth with this or chooses a different direction in filling the full-time position later on, that will be up to you.
I certainly understand Allison's position, and I do think it was presented as a pilot and something but I know that there's interest from different specialists in Miami-Dade County to have the opportunity to bid so I understand and even locally, I understand that we do like to have an open and transparent bidding process. And thank you, Allison, for bringing that up.
If I might suggest something, it's not just sole source because it's a provider, although it is that in my view. Mm-hmm. It's also D Squared emanates from the Green Committee that worked on the plan itself. This is a continuation process as I see it. I'd like to get through this year at the very least and follow this path, and we'll have the conversation at the end of this fiscal year as to what's next. I assume we're going to want to continue a green plan, and the question will be, how will we do so?
Well, absolutely, but I do think that sole source is when something is so incredibly unique that there's only one manufacturer. So I think this is not exactly sole source, but I do think that, again, for a pilot with the preliminary work they'd been doing for our community and the level of institutional knowledge that it happened to be for pilot to try to see where we should be, the right choice, but I don't think they're a sole source provider.
I'm not even drawing that vocabulary into this.
I think you said sole source.
He said sole source. I said it is that because it is a pilot. But I said this emanates from the committee that developed this plan in conjunction with our council. This is a continuation.
So do we feel comfortable voting on this particular initiative now?
Call the question, yeah.
All right.
I'll do a roll call. Councilmember Gross,
Yes.
Mayor Lindsay,
Yes.
Councilmember McCormick,
Yes.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kaplan,
Yes.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item is a capital project authorizing resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, selecting Centel LLC for the installation of a license plate reader system on the Mashta Bridge, providing for authorization, providing for implementation, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Mr. Manager.
It is recommended that the village council authorize the manager to execute an agreement with Centel LLC for the amount not to exceed $38,325 for a license plate reader system. The Mashta Isla Homeowners Association has decided to have an LPR camera system at the Mashta Bridge to identify all vehicles entering and exiting Mashta Island, and thus in large part be an overall safety enhancement for the community. Bids were received and reviewed, and it was recommended that Centel LLC be selected as the most responsive and responsible bidder. See Exhibit A. The Mashta Island Homeowners Association will fund the cost for the procurement and installation of the LPR system in an amount not to exceed $38,325.08.
Thank you.
I think, if I may just add one thing, I think that the Exhibit B is the letter from the Homeowners Association. I know that there were questions about who and what and how many, but
Council members, do you have any questions?
No.
So our only responsibility would be the actual keeping the recordings of the camera
may I ask Mr. Cowell to come forward and explain what the process is, Chief?
and maintenance of the cameras as well?
Right.
And we did get, I think, almost unanimity from the homeowners, and that's what really cinched this, is they are waiving their privacy rights in order to have this camera.
As we all should.
Well, we can't tell people what to do. They have to voluntarily do that.
Yes,
Hi, how are you?
Good evening, ma'am.
Nice to see you.
Likewise.
Please tell us a little bit about what the ongoing maintenance and, what and responsibilities we're going to have as a village, and just for edification. And
The initial cost of the system is what's the most expensive part of it. The rest of the maintenance will be maintaining a communications line to the devices. I believe that the proposal from Sutel covers the first 3 years.
Yep, that's correct. There's a 3-year extended warranty on the product.
Terrific.
So it will be additional cost after the first 3 years to maintain the hardware.
How much will that be?
Typically, those maintenance contracts do not exceed 15% of the total cost. But again, because we don't have to deal with it for the next 3 years, we really haven't priced it yet.
I'm not sure I understand what that means. I mean, 50% of the total cost?
15%.
15%.
15%.
I heard 50.
15.
On
I
an annual
apologize. Yes, 15% of the total
That's pretty steep
cost.
after 3 years.
Yes, after the 3 years.
Got it.
How long does the system last typically?
Typically, we've got systems that have been running in excess of 5 to 7 years. Typically, we look at hardware upgrades, and there are software upgrades, bugs, patches, fixes, and things like that that go along with the extended warranty. That's included with the initial purchase and with the initial upkeep for that 3-year duration. But typically, the hardware itself runs in excess of 7 years.
Is there an option to do an extended warranty after the 3 years?
Yes. Yeah, there's an option we can provide an option to renew after the initial 3-year period.
And what typically is the price of that for a system of this size?
It would typically run in line with what the initial 3-year warranty was. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it should be in the proposal that we submitted to the city.
Correct, and it should be in the documents you have in front of you.
Okay.
There's a line item specifically for 3-year extended warranty.
John, can I ask you a question? Are you finished? Okay. The license plate reader is really after the fact, after an incident happened, you can go back and find it, right? Obviously, everybody would like to.
Not necessarily.
No, that's not correct.
So, okay, because I guess what else?
Yeah, let me allow the police chief to explain exactly what an LPR is for you. Gentlemen, thank you.
They actually can identify
Send a warning out.
a bad car and.
Good evening, folks. The LPR is a multifaceted component. What it does is it uses databases from the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, FCIC, Florida Information Center, identifying any felony vehicles that may be entering the village. It identifies any of the alert systems that are put, Amber Alert systems, Silver Alert systems that are out there. It would identify that vehicle if we had somebody who wandered into the village, as happened on the night of the hurricane. So it does multiple things. It identifies people who have suspended driver's licenses, other violations. We can act should we wish, or we may not choose to act. But the databases are certified, they're renewed constantly, so they're all up to date. And it's quite the product, and it gives us a tremendous amount of advance information on top of the capability of recording vehicles coming in and leaving should we have, God forbid, another incident like we did.
Okay, so you have what you're identifying is a car. A felony can come in their sister's car if they want to, or they could steal someone's car and come in. Maybe hasn't been reported yet.
Yes, sir.
But anything can happen and you could also have somebody who's not a felon that's driving a car that's owned by a felon. And
correct.
So we're only identifying cars. But what I was going at is if you're trying to deter somebody from coming in also, is there going to be some type of signage there that displays, you've already been identified, or each vehicle, there's a camera reading system here?
We do not normally do that. No, it's not something like a red light system because it's not a penalty-based system. We don't normally let bad guys know that we're looking for their cars. So, you know, the red light is a different thing. It's statutory where you have to notify drivers that there are red light systems in place. That's not the case with the LPR.
Because if you let them know, they may not want to come, right? Because they know. It's almost like if I have cameras in my house.
Simple, Brett.
Yeah.
You know, but the fact is that you have bad guys that really don't care. It's more important that they see high visibility police, and that word will get around. All it's going to take is one incident. Because don't forget, I've talked about this in the past. Bad guys talk to each other. And word spreads fast as to what's a unique environment and what's a testy environment. And we want to make Key Biscayne a very difficult testy environment.
And this is going to be installed at the Mashta Bridge,
On the
right?
bridge, yes, sir.
If it works so well, why are we not installing this coming into
great question.
Crandon?
Absolutely.
I asked for that 3 years. I asked for that 3 years back, Brett.
Knowing that someone's coming in.
Right, about 3 years ago.
It's been brought before and it hasn't been approved, you know, but I think it's time for us to revisit the issue at some point.
There are people that aren't interested in having that live here.
Some people
that
don't
want to be monitored
to know
like that.
what they do. But
Well, it's a constitutional kind of, people don't think that they don't want to be surveyed.
right, so
And so the difference with Mashta Island is all the property owners agreed that they did not have a problem with
But they didn't all agree, and I don't know that everybody in the Key would agree either, but it's, I think, a majority.
We did have a majority on the island. I don't know you had 100%, but you had an overwhelming majority that did agree.
I think it was very, very, very high.
Yeah, it was an overwhelming majority.
It wasn't 60%,
No, it was most people.
Right, because we were all there.
Isn't everybody being photographed going through the toll?
Yes. Can I say something about that? Your red light camera takes a look at every vehicle coming in. Every time you go through that sun pass, your vehicle gets tagged. Whether it's here, whether it's on the turnpike, Big Brother's out there, watches every car, checks every tag, no matter where you're at in the state of Florida, pretty much. So we're already being observed in pretty much all the roadways.
Listen, we have some pirates here on Key Biscayne. We can't regulate the colors of houses. There's all sorts of things we can't do because people want to have that personal.
Well, maybe this could be a pilot again.
It's not the way I think. It's what has become before us. I mean, I'm just saying.
I understand, but you know, I happen to believe in a certain way. Brett believes in a certain way, and there's other people who believe in a certain way. At some point, maybe we revisit the issue and we'll figure it out.
Well, this seems like it's a perfect opportunity to watch how this works in a segment of our community.
Context, Luis. I was just giving his.
But every time that I've mentioned that you've given us the historical context, we're very aware of the historical context. Every time I mentioned that maybe we should be
Brett was just asking, why aren't we doing it everywhere else? So I was answering his questions. He didn't have the historical context.
Okay.
May I make a suggestion? Because we are now trying to vote on whether to accept
a gift.
Mashta Island's money to put this in for Mashta Island because they want it. So could we please stick to the issue and vote on this and maybe discuss the entire island at another time?
At another time, absolutely.
Well, we would have to notice it at least.
Please. So I would like to call the question.
Well, there you go,
Instead
Gary.
of noticing it, let's hack everyone's computer and deliver it that way.
Yes, Frank. I hear you. I hear you, Frank.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Good job.
Next.
The next is somewhat of a companion item. It is accepting the funds, a resolution accepting the funds.
I'm sorry, let me read the.
Yes.
And I'll keep quiet.
A resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, accepting funds from the Mashta Island Homeowners Association for a license plate reader system to be installed on the Mashta Bridge, providing for authorization and providing for an effective date.
Now I'll move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes,
I really have a question.
Please do.
Just one?
Feel free to ask all the questions.
If we try this out, it works fine, and the board, the council decides that we want to put it in here, and we decide to put one in here, would the Mata Island still want to keep theirs, or would be able to move theirs over and pay them back, or or Mata just gets it and that's it, and we would have two?
I think they keep it, and we put maybe even more than one if that's the will of the council in this community. I think it would be two, it's different,
Okay.
but they would all be compatible,
Okay.
And they would all.
technology.
I think it's a
And
very
they
good
would all-
question, okay, what you just asked, because I asked the same question to the Amashta owners people. I said, look, this is an idea that I think we should do, village-wide. And they said, well, in the meantime, we'll do our thing and then we'll figure it out. And, that's what we should, let's get this going, let's see how it works.
And Brett, that's why Chief Press was very instrumental in the technology that was chosen. He wanted to make sure that this, if we,
Expandable.
yes.
Great.
Now that we've already voted to
Please
spend the money,
call.
I would like to call the question.
All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Opposed?
Aye. No, aye. No nay.
No opposed.
Aye. I was just-
Motion carries. Next item, Madam Mayor, is reports and recommendations. Mayor and council members, review and approval of Crandon Initiative proposal to Miami-Dade County. Councilmember De La Cruz.
Okay, so we were thinking that we were going to be able to bring the contract back quickly, but we got a little bogged down with some of the wording and stuff, and we have to get back to Steve so that he gives it his once over or twice over before we bring it, and so we're going to bring it back in December. But in the meantime, Tom has a little presentation that he has put together in order to show you all what it is that we're looking at and how we're going to present it come December and thereafter.
Bear with me. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Council members, mayor, vice mayor. It's been exciting when the Community Foundation approached me with this project because I wasn't quite sure how much it encompassed and what it really entailed coming down through for the vital need, what's going on with Key Biscayne. And that's really my personal reaction. I was flattered that they asked me to come up with a vision for being a partner in this for active recreation here at the village of Key Biscayne for all the kids. And we were excited to try to come up with ideas on how it could, of course, benefit us at the village and how we could use these types of spaces and the types of areas to the best of our ability, being in a partnership with the rest of Miami-Dade County. So I thought I'd start off here. Look, nothing you're going to see here is set in stone today. I'm going to show you the lands that we're talking about. I'm going to show you sense of scale, sense of size, and relationship of ball fields, of all kinds of different active recreation, and all of the different areas that could be utilized in the future. And some sort of a vision of how I think we could use it along the way and how we all have come up with this idea. So with that being said, I thought we'd begin to utilize the lands. I'm going to use this pointer. I'm a little bit more familiar on the maps over here. So this is the area just in Crandon Park. Some of the areas to begin with. Here's the line of the village of Key Biscayne. This is this circle. This is a little area of Calusa Park. Just south of that is.
Just so you know, we can't see any of that.
You can't see this?
I can see it.
I can see it.
You guys can see it?
It's just down low.
Maybe it's my
Maybe
glasses.
it's, yeah. Okay, look, at the end of the day, right here at the beginning of all of the vegetation, you have an FPL substation. A lot of people don't know about this area. We hear that there's could be a lot of things that could happen with this area. This could be moved, and this small acreage could be utilized. The next piece of land we're talking about is Calusa Park. The next one up is the Miami-Dade County Fire Station that's here. There's actually, if you see this connection right here, this is actually an FPL easement that connects through. It exists today, not affecting any of the wetlands. And then of course, we have the tennis center, the existing tennis center, and then the baseball fields that are up on top. And these are the areas that we were going to be talking about and we looked at just for sense of scale coming down through. Let's jump in. You know, the following are thoughts and ideas for active recreation already developed in the area, in already developed areas of Crandon Park, and that's a very important. So these are all areas that already have things on them and working through. So we're not proposing any new development in any sort of regulated lands or wetlands or anything of the sort. So it's very important that we take note of these already developed lands. So the first one I'd like to focus on is right out, look, let's go back for 1 second. Let's go back for 1 second. The big idea here, the big concept is, wouldn't it be nice if we could access all of these areas west of the Rickenbacker Causeway? Couldn't kids and golf carts and bikes and parents and not having to use cars? So perhaps the backbone of this entire concept or this particular vision is right at the access that we have right now at the, I'll call it the St. Agnes traffic circle. There's a little golf cart path that runs by in the 7-Eleven and comes back through. You actually pass by the FPL substation, and then you can enter into Calusa Park. So wouldn't it be interesting if we could actually take that easement and actually have a golf cart path, a pedestrian path, a bike path, something well lit that could actually connect us all the way to the tennis center coming down through. So this is perhaps the biggest concept coming through. So let's start with the FPL substation. The initial vision here, and these are just concepts, rough ideas, is this little area that's just below Calusa Park. Maybe this is the closest to Key Biscayne. Maybe this is where, you know, you're jogging, you can head down the path, and maybe we thought that it could be some sort of outdoor recreation area where it's like one of these gyms down by Peacock Park, for example, in Coconut Grove. It's outdoor exercise equipment. You're jogging, you're walking, you're with the kids, you're going through. This is just a general concept or an idea for that particular area. Next, we get to Calusa Park. Calusa Park, the only reason you're seeing 2 soccer fields in there is for a sense of scale. It's 9.5 acres of land in there. It's really, I think it's a hub for tennis courts. We should have and continue to have tennis courts there. We can also have a multi-purpose field. You can still have the same amount of tennis courts you have there now with a new building and a soccer field. The soccer fields, amazingly enough, and you'll hear throughout the presentation, is, you know, that you can do soccer fields, lacrosse fields, there's rugby fields. All these sort of larger areas can all be multi-purpose and stationed. But just as a sense of scale to see how much space is actually in Calusa Park is nice. Over just to the top of this same segment is where the Miami-Dade County Fire Station is. The Miami-Dade County Fire Station, if it were to ever come down, I hear, then we could have, you know, basketball regulation there. I'm showing 3 full-court basketball courts, maybe a smaller building, a shaded pavilion onto the side. And this is where what looks like maybe little tracks coming through. This is, you know, a 10, 12-foot wide wooded golf cart path, bike path, pedestrian path that can access us all the way down through these areas safely, all west of Rickenbacker Causeway. So we show the size of tennis courts coming down through, all in Calusa Park, the basketball courts and the size and the regulations. So when you go back to this thing and you see this little kink up on the side, these are full regulation courts, just again to give a sense of scale and what could actually go there. Basketball courts, soccer. But also in Calusa Park, to be quite honest, wouldn't it be nice if there was a place where the adults could have their exercise and the kids could have a playground, and that's the closest area to Key Biscayne where you could then venture back through. Then as you start to go up through the meandering path, we call it the nature trail. So this nature trail on the FPL easement coming up through, we can actually have some very interesting elements to it. So it is a direct access. It's right through all the mangroves. It's very interesting. Maybe something like Penny Camp Park. Maybe we can have some other nature trails branching off of the wider path that some golf carts can go down and things of the sort, but an actual connection that would come through. Then we get to the tennis center. The tennis center is 32 acres of land. If the stadium were not to be there, you know, obviously I think there would be a range of, these tennis courts actually exist in the north-south orientation, you know, for the sun. You know, there's some tennis courts that are back on the side, but we're showing, you know, what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24 courts. It could be any amount of courts. It doesn't have to be. I'm just trying to give a sense of scale. I'm showing 4 large soccer fields, football fields, lacrosse fields. All these things could be multi-purpose, Olympic-sized pool. You know, this is a natural lake that's within the area, and a lot of people don't know anything about it. If it were opened up slightly, maybe there could be some activities that are on the side, a pavilion that sort of houses everything, again, for Miami-Dade County and for us to come through to regulate these sporting events coming through. So some of the activities that we're showing here, even beach volleyball, I mean, there's all sorts of things. Of course, we'd have tennis, there's squash tennis, wall tennis, racquetball, football. So the football fields, the lacrosse fields, and the soccer fields, oddly enough, are all very much the same size. So they could be all multi-purpose sorts of spaces. Lakeside life, like I was talking about, we can have little stops. Maybe we can have like open theater sorts of things as well too, and get kind of creative with that lake that's natural on that particular area. Frisbee golf, big open fields coming through. And the last area I wanted to talk about is where we have the two smaller baseball fields on the east side. We think, that's 7.2 acres. What we're suggesting here is, you could actually do maybe a multi-diamond space and really get 4 fields. You can have more of a high school field, little league fields, kind of in a quadrant, better laid out, and get more athletic events that are here on the side. So this was just a small thoughts, size of baseball fields coming through. So this is really the end of the presentation for size and scale of these sorts of spaces and what could be utilized in these areas with the backbone of connected them.
You're the new Olmsted.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Tom?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, I didn't see where the Olympic pool was. It's in there.
It was very small.
It's in there. It's in there. It gets dwarfed by the lake.
Yeah.
It gets dwarfed by the lake.
I can't see.
There actually is an area of.
It's here. Look at it.
Where?
Right there.
That little.
It's also right against the soccer field.
So we're going to have crocodiles in
Yeah.
that pool.
Right.
We're going to need crocodile land.
And it doesn't have to be a pool. Does it have to be? There's lots of
That's a
thoughts. All I'm
50
saying is
meter?
this amount of size and the amount of things.
That's a
that are there.
50-meter pool, Olympic-sized pool?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. So.
You use watercolor?
Yes. No, Prisma.
Prisma, okay.
Prisma.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Our next discussion item is kiteboarding.
Okay.
Katie.
I wanted to speak about this really as a wrap-up and an idea to try to move something forward, given our workshop last week. I felt like there was cooperation and understanding on both sides, and my understanding is this has been going on for a long time. And one of my thoughts was that on both sides there was an agreement that if we could have some control of what's happening on our beaches with kiteboarders, and one of the things in particular was making sure that the proficiency of the riders was at a skill that they could independently and safely maneuver on our beaches. And as a result, there's a ribbon system. There was an expert here that explained that there's some very defined parameters that can be in place that we could hopefully regulate in a quick and efficient way. And then some of the larger issues of access to the water and a potential channel would take more time, but maybe we could put in place some restrictions on the level of skill of riders and come up with some enforcement for the days that are in play, because there's not a lot of days that are at issue. It's usually weekends, and it has to be a windy weekend, and the wind has to be coming from the right direction. And then I think those are pretty easy to determine, and we could hopefully put some enforcement in place. The other thing that I was thinking is, because we're adding a person with our code enforcement, that this person could potentially help and be part of the administration of a regulation of the riders. And so I actually spoke to Sergio right before this. He thought that that might be a good idea. And I spoke to Chief Press about trying to dovetail with our law enforcement. If we could get something in place from a legal perspective that would be an ordinance that would restrict the kiteboarders that could use our beaches. So I wanted everybody's thoughts on that.
Thank you. And sorry. Brett had asked, and then Gary.
Okay.
Okay. Brett?
I was at the workshop as well, and I was very happy with, I think that we're moving in a good direction. I was actually in a condominium at my mother-in-law's house on Saturday, and the kiteboarders were out, and unfortunately, I'm watching them going straight through the
The
exclusion zone and coming into the beaches. Probably not ours, but they're doing it. So it was unfortunate that I saw that right after the workshop. But I do think that there could be a mechanism that because I don't want to ban it. There could be a mechanism, but the biggest challenge that I see right now for us is that they need 100 feet wide channel to go out. Where we end up putting that is going to be very difficult. I mean, if you stuck that, I live in the Ocean Club. If you came, we're going to put it in front of the Ocean Club, I guarantee all the Ocean Club would be up in arms. Like, why are you putting this? I have to come out and walk 100 feet to the right or left and to get to sit out and enjoy the beach. So that's going to be the biggest challenge that I see that we're going to face right now. I think it can be controlled. It's just, where are we going to put it?
Well, the way that it currently exists is there is this exclusion zone, and there is not a channel that allows them to go out and ride from the beach. Whether the enforcement isn't always there either. But as a result of that, right now, anybody can go out as long as they do the body drag out to the 300 feet. And I don't disagree with you that if we're going to create a channel, that's a tough decision. But that's why I think we need to tackle the rider side of this first, because I don't think that has as much concern and that's not as difficult. And it shows that we're looking to try and deal with the issue that we are unregulated as far as who can ride on our beaches. And right to the north of us on Crandon, it's not unregulated. So we are an open invitation at this point for unregulated riding.
Gary.
I think Brett brought up the major challenge, and we're going to have a very tough time finding a location. I think that we should explore the possibility of having Cape Florida allow this activity in their already water sport oriented spot on the northern part of Cape Florida. It's already
Gary, if I could interrupt for 1 second, I am already working on starting that exploration.
Terrific. And to me, Allison and everyone, if we could end up having an agreement with Cape Florida to use their point, which is patrolled, policed, supervised, and everything else, it might be a really good solution for everyone involved. Because I think before we can even talk about the regulation of it and everything else on our 1.25 mile beach, we have to come to terms with, we got to find a place to put it first. And if we can't find a place to put it, then there really isn't any sense talking about how to regulate it.
But it exists currently, and we're not doing anything to regulate who's using our beaches.
That's true. But if we can quickly find out where the Cape Florida is an alternative, then we can simply say, this is where the kiteboarding is, and it's not in our 1.25 mile beach.
Frank.
I'd like to encourage, first of all, Allison, it's a correct strategy if it's achievable to try to use the area maybe between the towers, close by the towers, but perhaps a little bit south of there, close to one of the walkways from the parking area, for example, so that people could conveniently drive up there. We should definitely explore that. And Allison, if we could, marshal the best possible talking points to justify the ask with the state park, in part because I'm concerned that any solution that would require the park to in any way favor our residents over the general population would be difficult. So how to create some kind of a ratio of numbers, the general population on the one hand, Key Biscayners who were permitted on the other hand, is a problem to be solved. I like what Katie has suggested, and I think we should do that, because if we wait for the solution to the problem that you have correctly identified as the big challenge, number one, we're going to be having that conversation that we were trying to avoid, or at least I was trying to avoid, about moratorium, flat-out moratorium, that was driven by the correct presumption on the part of those who fear this activity that if some kind of ameliorative action regulation isn't taken very quickly, an inherently dangerous condition will persist for an unspecified period of time. So if we wait to do all at once, I think we defeat incrementalism. And incrementalism is well served, I think, by the several practical suggestions that basically had a pretty fair amount of consensus. The limiting the numbers and the permitting, and including in the permitting the standard of competence, as demonstrated, and some kind of an indication, a streamer or what have you, that would suggest to an onlooker that that's a person who's qualified to be out there, who's licensed.
So, Steve, is there any chance that we can come up with regulations for our December on level of competence and on streamers to identify that you registration of competence, and you get a streamer that you put on your sale for first reading of an ordinance December 4th and
limiting
second
numbers.
reading and limiting numbers. So those three very limited issues, we probably have templates somewhere.
Well, also, I think the gentleman that came to speak to this and has a successful program in Matheson Hammock would be willing to discuss it with you, come up with ideas, and you can hear what he does and then maybe adopt some language specific to this.
First reading December, whatever day of the meeting is, and second reading January 9th.
And Steve, I'm happy to try to help you with this.
Is this
I took
possible?
extensive notes and have been
Because the season will be over,
in
we don't act
contact
quickly.
with them.
Okay, well, I'll do my best to get it by that date. I need to have
I
some
will-
conversations.
I will
have
talk to you too.
Look at our beach regulations. This will be a zoning regulation in effect because we're going to be regulating land
Okay.
uses on the beach. So we've got holidays in between. I don't even know if we're going to make the publication requirements by that date, but I'll try.
Okay, we have a speaker from the audience who'd like to address. Mr. Ellisberg.
I'll send you a form.
Thank you.
Don Ellisberg, 177 Ocean Lane Drive. I liked everything you all said, and I wouldn't object, I can't object to the way you're headed with the following exception. Over this weekend, we had a mass defiance, not of us, but of the village, by kiteboarders on that beach that we talk about over here next to the park. Each of you has received the photos of the 2 days of kiteboarding, okay? Large numbers, even to the point where your expert Kent said it was unreasonable. Okay. If you write all this out, okay, and you put together in the next week or so, Steve, a set of proposals and everybody signs on and you assign somebody to register them, where are they going to go and kiteboard until you figure out what's going on the other side of the towers? And that's the question I think you need to address. We sent you the photos of what it's doing to our beachgoers. We also sent you another letter from one of our longstanding residents giving you chapter and verse of what they had. The other point I wanted to add, because of these photos, which is relevant to what came up at the workshop, is the particular place they are going now, all right, is directly opposite the sandbar. So whatever rule you put together, if they continue to use that place, right out to the sandbar, and you're going to have everybody back again. So I think as you work this through, you've got to consider what's the level of risk that you want the existing beachgoers to be subjected to until you have a legitimate channel, until you have everything in place, until you get all this stuff off the beach. And I pose that to you as the question, not, sir, in terms of the moratorium, but the practical side of what happens when I have a banner and I have my, is a level 3 card, I have all that, I come out, and because of where I am, I go out there, I am still going to be the risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's just a consideration, I think. Would be.
Thank you. Yes, Frank.
I completely sympathize with everything he said, as I did at the workshop. The question that Don, the ultimate question is whether this activity, as I said at the workshop, is inherently unsafe unless there's some way to physically separate people that enjoy the beach that aren't surfing from people that are launching and recovering, involving the lines and the risk that the wind blows in a wayward way and they're unintendedly snagging a beachgoer. That's a question it's a fair question. And we won't have an answer, I think, until we see whether this ameliorative effect makes a difference. And if it does, great, and we have something better to work from. And if it doesn't, we'll know that.
Yes, Katie, and then Brett.
I would suggest ideally, and I don't know the answer, first of all, I think by having this restriction and registration, and when we put it in place, theoretically, there isn't anybody that is, I mean, they would have to go through our parameters once we pass this. So technically, at the very beginning, nobody is available to go on our beaches because they need to go through our registration process. So, and they have to get registered. So that will dramatically reduce the numbers of people on our beaches to begin with. And then I think we'll see what the numbers are. I'm assuming it'll be less than what currently exists and hopefully somewhat dramatically. And third, ideally, if we do have safe kiteboarders and they are conscious of our bathers and they're following our rules and regulations, ideally, they could be somewhat in close proximity. People who are on the beaches are not restricted. They just don't necessarily, if they feel safe, there may be a closer connection than what's currently happening.
I agree with that.
Which guard station is the one closest? Is that guard station 1 that's closest to this is the most southern?
No, I think it's 13.
13. It's the other way. Okay. So the photographs that Don sent, it was very interesting because I don't know where the village line is in proximity to guard station 13. And in that photograph, those kiteboarders were very close to that guard station. It almost seemed like they were partly on ours and partly on Miami-Dade's side.
They were originally.
They chased them away. So they just moved a little bit farther south and they were, okay.
We did have enforcement out there this weekend, and I don't know if you want to speak to what he found while he was there. Your staff members, go ahead.
I allowed, but this isn't supposed to be ongoing.
Sorry.
That's okay. And Brett, you're done with your question. So I think we have some direction for you, Steve. Thank you.
Can I understand what the direction is? Because I'm really not sure. What is it that we're going to do?
We are looking to put together an ordinance that will ensure the level of proficiency of kiteboarders that board on our beaches, and it'll have a clear designation, and those are the only people, if we pass it, if we agree to what is there, those are the people that can use our beaches. So there will be some restrictions on kiteboarding on the Key Biscayne beaches.
But by the inverse, then we are allowing
everybody else.
That we're, I'm sorry?
Then you're prohibiting anybody else.
That isn't registered.
Right.
Who isn't registered and who isn't at least a level 3 rider.
And
this is a temporary measure.
So I understand. How are they supposed to launch?
The same way they're launching now, which is they do what's called this body drag. If they do it legally, they body drag out to the 300-foot line of the exclusion, and then they start riding.
Yeah,
and they're supposed to do that inversely.
Some of them do that. You're right. So.
Okay, so now I want to be clear because
right.
Is this
a registration and test that you take, and who's gonna give the test? Who's the licensing authority?
That's my concern.
That will be
That
determined.
was discussed at the workshop.
Okay,
and
well,
there
I need to
are
know, because I'm drafting the
14
ordinance.
I have that for you.
Who's making the rules here?
We are, there are model rules that are used, and my understanding was that both the guy that handled the concession at Crandon Park
Right.
and the guy who handles the concession at Matheson Hammock had those, that format and that test.
And are they gonna do the test for us? They're gonna test the people for
They agreed.
proficiency?
They said they would. We need to.
Okay, well, that's what I need to know.
Yes.
So,
What it boiled down to is this. There are several vendors that do this. So the guy who wants to get the permit goes to whatever the kite shop is. He goes through their test. They give a certificate that he brings to the village. We determine that it's true and accurate, and we issue a permit.
okay.
With
So
a ribbon.
That means that he can do his sport. Now, are there other rules and regulations you want to put in place, other than the fact that he's a safe boarder?
Numbers.
Numbers?
Not only,
The need to have a identifying thing that's visible from the beach, a streamer.
also how they set up their kites on the beach. The lines were never allowed to be out until they were just about to launch.
I
and they
thought
had to
that
be
that was
dragged.
gonna be,
And there was an item of equipment that they recommended, that the jettison button, if you remember what I.
Up-to-date equipment.
That was like an
That's part of the
emergency relief
certification process.
for the site.
Okay.
said anything
And
after
as Louise asked-
2013 is.
Steve, the certification is like an international organization that gives this level of certification.
Patty.
And the vendors happen
like
to
Patty.
be people who are certified to certify you, if you will.
Okay. And are we not, is there a specific location where we're authorizing people to launch from?
That,
Not at this
not
point.
at this point.
Okay, so they can do, if they're registered, they can do it anywhere on Key Biscayne's Beach?
Right now, yes.
Well, let's try to parse this a little bit. Let's just think. If our regulation includes the proposition of body dragging, number one, so that we regulate it. Number two, something to the effect of using due care to avoid passerbyers, safe and so forth.
Sounds good in writing, but.
Sounds good in writing. But it's better than nothing. And when recovering, the same principle. The guy who described how you do that safely talked about that jettison button and the depowering the sail. You're going to need to know how to write that, but there are certain standards that I think are worth trying to get into this ordinance.
So you're gonna have to try it this weekend. This is too much. I really thought, I thought that we were gonna limit it to 3 things because what the scope of what just happened is just too much. I thought what Katie's initial suggestion of certification through whatever international, a permit from Key Biscayne, the streamer, and limited numbers. That I thought was doable as temporary measures.
And a permit fee.
To have some regulation, to have some regulation to try to control the numbers so that you don't have
So do
30
you get a
sales
per-
out
as
there.
as long as you have this certification, you get a permit from the Key?
We will only
It's just
have.
an automatic thing, you
You,
just need to
no,
apply?
you need
No,
to
a
apply
limited
and there will,
number of
there will
permits
be only
available.
25 given.
You need to be tested by this gentleman and
Okay.
get the certification of.
So it's the first 25 who get to the door?
First 25 who got to the door.
That's not what I understood from the workshop.
But I mean, how did
No, I mean temporarily.
Temporarily.
Whatever, that was an arbitrary number, but it was, we wanted to limit it, but
Well, tell me how many.
But I mean, how did we come up with such an arbitrary number? I mean,
I wasn't thinking of limiting.
No,
the
they
number
had
right
a
now.
number.
What was their?
they had a number, they said that.
They also suggested the use of that app that would limit the number of kites that could be out at a given time, and
Yeah.
anyone holding a permit could check and see if there was space for that to go and launch.
But again, we're getting past.
Way too, we just wanted a kind of,
it's going to be impossible to enforce. That's all I can tell
We're
you.
gonna need to have somebody out there full time.
Katie, and to Katie's point, and I think she is spot on, when we had 2 code enforcement officers, The first one was supposed to be for construction. The second one was hired for turtle inspections. And I don't know what the scope of, and now we have a third one. But with that second one, that was a part-time job because you don't do turtle enforcement all year long. So I think that there's some play there to have the same person, but this is a little further along.
Again, I think to do something, I agree with you on having 3 simple things and having
Yes.
that brought before us just to get a start.
Yep.
This is meant to be a
It's
start.
meant to start, and
Streamers, right?
Streamers and registration of riders.
And a permit.
There's no enforcement.
Do we want to discuss doing anything in the interim, given this weekend situation?
The
on
other thing I need to know is what's the penalty?
Yeah, well, there was no penalty until, well,
well, there has to be a fine.
there would have to be a speed
Which they
fine.
could pay or not pay. I guess they could revoke their, I guess you revoke their registration.
The registration they didn't have?
You have to take the streamer.
Who remembers this?
Well, I think the
They don't
penalty
have
is
to
for
pay the-
unregistered
They don't have to pay the
riders.
fine. In other words, this isn't a traffic ticket. If somebody gets a ticket, they say, see you later.
The understanding was that this group was going to have, I don't know what they call it, a beach marshal? They used a term, I don't remember what the term was.
And that
Like
they're
a beach marshal.
volunteers and it works.
That they would volunteer somebody there full-time, and they know the rules, and if they see anybody breaking them, they will be the first one that will report it to our police.
We have a lot of things to work at. I want,
Talk about
I
this
want
tomorrow.
indemnities from these people who are testing these people, because I don't want to be, we're basically putting this responsibility onto a private vendor. And if somebody gets injured, we're going to get sued. So, so we really need to think about this
Fair enough.
carefully.
Fair
Okay,
enough.
I can tell you it's not happening by the 4th.
Okay.
I
Yes.
think the focus needs to be on finding a place for it. That is the most important thing, and seeing if we can go with the park, and the park will help us out with this, and we have some concessions that we can do with them or something. There's that area there between the towers and the north part of the park is the least used.
Keep in mind that if we don't do anything, it's status quo as what currently exists, and right now, Crandon only allows it in one area, and therefore, our beaches on the northern end are the access point for people that do not want to go through the certification or the expense of kiteboarding on Crandon.
And for
Okay,
residents.
but if you want to try to take an incremental step, then why don't you just make it, you need to be certified.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, and that, if you believe that that will eliminate a large part of the problem and ensure some more safety, then just do that. Because once you start getting into this other stuff,
So Steve, let's do that.
certification, and you register with the village and see.
So
And in the
we're
meantime-
requiring the IKO Level 3 certification.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if we put on our next agenda and follow up on the status of
No teaching, right?
the policies and the kiteboarders who are going out and coming up with.
That's right.
With,
Well, everything else can continue to move forward on these bigger issues that are going to take a longer time to solve.
Steve,
One
Steve
of the
just remember.
things we're going to really have to do, though, is limit it to a certain location. Because as difficult as this is going to be to enforce, we can't possibly enforce it on a 1.25 mile stretch of beach. So we have to figure out.
Right now, they're all hubbed in one area.
Well, then maybe we confine it to that one area. I don't know, but you can't have a free-for-all on our entire beach.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I would like to see us take that first step.
Okay. No teaching, right? A
No
level three
teaching.
person can't
No.
teach anybody
No.
out there.
Absolutely
no commercial, no commercial, no teaching, no commercial.
Okay. Okay,
Village
I can
residents
get you that by the 4th.
IKO certification.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Steve. The meeting's December 5th, everybody.
December 5th.
Great, an extra day.
You get an extra 20.
We still haven't decided
That's
when
Now
the
I
meeting's
can
going to be.
Wednesday?
get it done.
Wednesday? No.
I'm sorry, December 5th is a Tuesday.
That's a set date right now.
So Steve will
But-
pull it all-nighter Monday.
But there's a motion on the table for the ordinance for second reading if someone would like to discuss that now, and we can decide.
But does that mean we've decided definitively on the 5th?
There is, I cannot find the Florida League of Cities dinner date. They don't set it until maybe next week or so.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So if we already have a meeting scheduled, then we can't do it.
Let's do this. So what was the ask was to do it on
December
the 7th?
7th, which is a Thursday.
Well, this isn't on my calendar.
I'm sorry?
League of Cities, you said?
The Florida League of Cities?
Miami-Dade League
Or
of
I'm
Cities.
sorry, Miami-Dade County League of Cities.
When is it, you said?
They don't have the
posted
date
it.
set, correct.
Why don't we call?
But they usually do it. Yes, we're
that
going to
guy's
have to
name?
call. Do you have Richard's number?
Yeah, what's that? What's Richard? I got it.
Cooper.
I'm gonna call him right now.
Okay, so that item still, anyway, I'll bring this back to your next meeting.
I'll work
Okay,
with
so
you
that-
and
I have the direction. I don't think I need any vote or anything. We'll just keep moving.
thank you.
Next item,
Back to the others.
Madam Mayor's discussion on monument signs. Councilmember Petros.
Okay,
She takes the easy.
again, as a follow-up,
Why are you picking all the easy items?
I want to make sure we set a date for the secondary workshop, and I wanted to make a suggestion that we broaden this beyond just monument signs and deal with our sign ordinance as a whole.
Yes.
January.
I'm looking at dates.
Okay.
Are you working on that?
January 25th, Thursday, January 25th.
I don't have anything right now.
Are you working on that?
I haven't done anything since the workshop, but I wanted
I'll tell you,
to expand on it.
I've gotten a lot of people who want to participate.
This is the monument sign workshop?
Yep.
The 25th?
Thursday, January 25th.
What time?
You'll send the invite?
6.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No problem.
You really need a personal assistant.
I do. I really do.
I showed the November meeting was November 2nd.
That's very sexist of you.
Do we want to rename this and not have it as a monument sign workshop, but as a sign ordinance workshop? How do you?
Maybe Gary will take it. He's retired.
I said to rename it as the sign ordinance workshop, not monument sign. Since we're
Perfect.
looking-
Sign ordinance workshop. Does everyone agree with?
Yes.
Okay.
So I got a calendar appointment for the November 2nd board meeting, which was in Surfside for the League of Cities,
November 2nd.
November 2nd.
It's usually the first
Thursday.
Thursday of the month,
Yep.
which is why we're concerned about
Seven.
December 7th.
I think there's nothing here.
I saw something today, to tell you the truth.
Yes.
It was 2018.
That's my-
There's no, I searched I searched and I don't have the invitation yet.
You're right. I got something yesterday on that.
It was the newsletter with all the ethics and the different events.
Good Wi-Fi.
Okay, so our next item, Madam Clerk.
Next item. I apologize.
I'm calling Cooper. I'll be right back.
Next item is beach renourishment update. Councilmember Gross.
Well, in the ever-evolving effort to get a major beach renourishment, we continue to explore and learn. And last Wednesday, we had a conference call with 4 members of the Army Corps of Engineers and Spencer Crowley, who was, if you remember, I had Jennifer send out to all of you the resume of Spencer Crowley and also a lobbyist, Jim Davenport. And what we've concluded, we originally thought that we were going to be able to get a major beach renourishment done, working primarily with the state. And as it turns out, the more we learn, the more we're starting to realize that we really have to go the federal route for a couple of different reasons. Number one, there's a lot more money to be had going the federal route. Number two, if we go the federal route and the Army Corps of Engineers is marshaling our program, That's top down, that's not bottom up. If the Army Corps is responsible for this program, they don't need a permit from Durham, and they don't need a permit from DEP. They do the project and it gets done. And all the problems that we've experienced over the last couple of renourishments with seagrass and everything else kind of disappear and they handle it. They have several different programs that are used for funding beach renourishment. And the more I learn about all of these programs, the more we sort of are focusing in on one of them. There's a 103 program, and that's basically a program that was already used by us for I think it was our 1987 renourishment project, and we thought we could go that route, but it turns out that's a one-time deal. You can't go back to that once you've used it. There's a Section 111 program, and what that's all about is that if the Army Corps, through one of their projects, is responsible for a problem that you're having, and you can prove that they're responsible, then they will take the initiative, supposedly, and correct the problem with their own resources and on their own dime. But from what I've been able to find out, it's very difficult, obviously, to get the Army Corps to take responsibility, and it's a very long, drawn-out process, and nobody would really put a time frame on how long it might take to get to that point. The best route, I think, is the route that's been taken by Dade County and Miami Beach, and that's the Hurricane Shoreline Protection Program, which is a federally sponsored program. Under that program, there's federal funding, and communities, shoreline communities that are under this program automatically have a process where their beach needs are reviewed by the Army Corps, they're analyzed, and they're dealt with as they're needed. It's a 50-year program. The one that Dade County is under expires in the year 2025. And at that point, we could try to get under their umbrella when they reapply. However, that requires us waiting 7 years before we even get anywhere. And during that 7-year period of time, we could potentially have to do 2 or 3 what Tim called Band-Aid renourishments, where we're spending $2 or $3 million and fighting the seagrass issue before we can get our major project done. So it leads us to where we are right now. And one of the reasons, the primary reason that why I think we need to seriously consider retaining Spencer Crowley and Jim Davenport. Spencer is the head of Florida Inland Waterway, and he works with the Army Corps on a regular basis on virtually every inland and coast-wide waterway project that comes under their jurisdiction. And he's an attorney with Ackerman, very well versed in this entire area federally. He works with Jim Davenport, who is a federal lobbyist specializing in exactly what we're talking about, which is beach renourishment projects, and has worked with Spencer on many, many projects over the years, and Spencer has a high degree of confidence in him. This whole thing is very political. So what we think is the best course of action right now for the quickest route to getting a major major beach renourishment project done with federal help, federal funding, and the Army Corps' help in designing it, is to try to get us into the shoreline protection program right now before 2025. We've got this window with Ileana, who's already made an overture that said if there's anything that she can do to help before she leaves office, she's happy to do that. So there's a really great ally there. If we can combine that with Spencer's resources and Jim's resources, I think it's the best shot that we have to get a federal route to a major beach renourishment. The local, and we keep finding this out over and over again, they're very limited in money. When I'm talking local, I'm talking state. They're very limited in money. Their selection process is extremely difficult, And in order to determine who gets money in any given year, they grade you. You make an application and they grade you. And the applicants with the highest point count are the ones that get the money. Well, if we actually get involved in the federal program, that gives us lots of extra points.
20 to 25 additional points.
Exactly, for state. And if we can do this, now we have an opportunity to get federal and state funding and federal assistance in developing our program. And I think we have to go for it. My opinion is, after spending a lot of time on this and talking to a lot of people and doing a lot of reading, I've kind of reached a conclusion that our best shot at getting a major beach program done, and we really, really need it, is to go this route. It's going to cost us some money. Hiring Jim Davenport, the lobbyist, he wants a contract for $6,000 a month for a year. His normal rates are $7,500. But because he works with Spencer, he's offered $6,000 a month for a year. Spencer, if we use Jim Davenport, doesn't think his time commitment is going to be all that expensive, but it's going to require his efforts in conjunction. Now, it seems like a lot of money. There's no question about that. But we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that are at stake here. And I don't think there's any route to this, from what I've learned, rather than going down this road and seeing if they can get us to where we need to be. We have a couple of different ways to approach it, and I don't expect us to decide right now by any means. I think if you all read what I sent you, if you want to have them come down and talk to us, one or both of them, and make a presentation like we did with Colleen, that would be great. Now, this, by the way, is working in conjunction with Colleen.
Now, Gary, did they all want to make a presentation at our December meeting?
They do.
Something? Okay.
They do want to make a presentation at the December meeting.
Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Special presentation on beach renourishment strategies. Yes.
Make a quick comment.
Yes.
Sure.
Something that you alluded to was the issue of the seagrass, which is a big issue. And I think that maybe this is something that we can talk to our consultants about when they come. But I would think that after the hurricane, a lot of the seagrass has gotten picked up, and maybe has even receded back. And it may be advantageous to quickly go out there and try to establish the line of where the seagrass is. I don't know what the process is. It would be nice maybe if Tim is ready for us next. He got the baseline after the storm. Great. And the problem with that, Brad, is that what it is today doesn't matter. It's what it is once you start your renourishment program, and it very quickly marches in. So it probably has receded some, but by the time we get another program, and this major, we could probably do another Band-Aid in the meantime, but as far as this, we're talking, just to give you an idea, this last renourishment program we did was 19,000 cubic yards of sand. The initial estimate that we're getting is to do a major restoration like in 1987. It's going to be somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000 cubic yards of sand. It's going to be incredibly expensive. It's going to be incredibly complex. And I don't see, unless we're willing to go the route alone and foot the bill alone, how we cannot explore this, because if we're looking at a $12 or $15 million beach restoration, which is what it very easily could potentially cost, I think we've got to go for this using whatever clout we can get through Ileana, through Spencer, through the lobbyists, and put a full court press on this.
Tom's right.
Yep.
We cannot count on Tallahassee, that's for sure.
No, we
Well,
cannot.
actually, we need to do a two-prong approach. We still need the state, and they can be our friends, and we've been working on that. And, I mean, they were the first ones to tell us that we needed to go the federal route, that would yield us a lot more results and give us, favor. And also, we can continue working on the legislation to make sure that we can go up on the ranks, and that's something that we've been doing actively for the last couple of years.
And by the way, this in order to, I think that this will avoid the RFQ process, they will come underneath Colleen's contract with us. She will hire them as part of her team, because if you recall, when she came on, she said she's going to need some pieces in her team, especially if this goes the federal route. Well, these pieces are in place now. She knows these people. She's willing to work with them, anxious to work with them, and she wants to add them to her team under her contract. So hopefully, Steve, that information is correct as far as the RFQ, since we already have the contract with Colleen. And if it is, that would make it even that much simpler for us to do that.
And Gary, I want to thank you because we've been working on this together, and I think it's going really well. Thank you.
I think we're really making progress, and we're really learning a lot.
We're a good team.
So, do we want them to come down?
Yes.
On the December meeting, which hopefully I'm at?
Next item, underground utilities contract status update. Councilmember Moss.
So I just wanted to get a quick report from our manager and our village attorney on what the process is that you're going through in the negotiations for the engineer that we selected, where we are in the process, and when you see that we may have a contract in front of us that we can start looking at, a negotiated contract.
Sure. We have a, the way that the contract is being proposed is that there is a master agreement that will apply to all phases of the project. And it deals with such things as insurance, indemnities, all kind of the standard provisions that you would have in an agreement with a professional services contract. We have gotten through virtually all of those provisions with them in terms of an agreement. We now have just been submitted within the past few days what is known as the first IPO, which is the way this contract will work is that you will authorize phases. Okay? Under the master agreement, you will put out, they will work with us on, and you will put out a purchase order, basically. Okay, a purchase order for a scope of work and a price. So the first purchase order that we are working on right now that you'll be presented with the master agreement is the master planning purchase order. Okay, it's their first phase of work, and we are working on the scope of the master plan right now. I probably will have a telephone call this week with them to go through the scope of their work that they intend to include. Once we arrive at the scope of that first phase, the master plan, they will then give us a price, okay? We will assess whether we think that's correct, fair, the basis upon which it's been given to us, and if we agree upon a price, the contract will come to you. So, what do I see? I see by year end that you'll have a contract with them for phase one, which is the master planning process. So that's where we are.
What comes after the master planning process? I just wanted to be clear.
The next phase would likely be a design phase.
Okay.
Which is now you've decided you're going forward, and now they begin to design the entire system, working with FP&L, working with all of the utilities, and they begin to develop a design package, which ultimately then will go out to bid. You'll hire a contractor, and so there's probably 5 phases during all of this.
Okay.
But this is the first phase. This is a very big step. This is going to give you the whole program from A to Z with cost estimates, risk estimates, all the kind of things that I think you all have been asking about for a long time. This will probably be a 6-month plan to develop. So if they start in January, by the summer, I think you'll have a master plan, depending on how smoothly that process goes.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
have kind of guidelines on how to make that smoother so that we don't interrupt the process.
Well, there are guidelines that are being built into the
Good.
agreement. And basically, just so you know, they're going to be interacting on a regular basis with the task force, okay? This is, they will come to the council on an, as needed, an interim basis to bring you up to date on what has been developed and what the task force has given them input on and comments on, but their interaction, day to day, week to week, month to month, will be with the task force. If there's a decision to be made about, do you want do you want to include within the master plan a certain type of communication, facilities? They'll get the input of the task force, who will give them, yes, we want that included in the master plan. So that's the process that they envision, and they say they think that if things go smoothly, 6 months, they will have a master plan for you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, tomorrow night, there is the first meeting of the Utilities Task Force, and it's really just sort of a organizational meeting. Picking a chairman, learning sunshine law, learning public records law, all that kind of stuff. And I also invited the Kimley Horn representative, Josh, to that meeting so he can make a brief presentation to them of what his scope of work will be and how he anticipates working with them.
Great.
So that'll be tomorrow.
Thank you. Next item, Madam Mayor, is the manager's search status update. Councilmember Moss.
So again, this is just getting an update. I just wanted to make a quick comment that this was brought up in the last meeting, which I was very sick in bed for that meeting. And thank you to Katie to continue to have it on the agenda item. And I did watch it live, and I agreed with everything you guys said, and I'm very happy with the direction that the council decided to go in. That being said, I know that there was talk about finding the search firm for the new manager search, and just wanted to get an update again of where we are on that.
The request for qualifications is done. Hopefully, I had hoped it would get to you all quicker because I wanted to get any comments that you had, but I think in the past 24 hours, hopefully you guys saw a draft of it. And if there's anything you want us to put in there, but basically this is just the solicitation proposals, qualifications for recruiting search firms. It has nothing to do with the manager's selection. It's the qualifications to try to find the best search firm that we can. And Gary has given me the name of 4 firms, all of which actually I know about and we would have sent it to, but I'm happy to be, confirm that those are quality firms. So this will likely go out tomorrow unless we hear anything different from any one of you. It's going to be released and published, and I forget how many days we asked them to respond within.
30 days.
Thank you very much.
So we won't see this until January.
So, yeah, you won't see this list of proposals till January, because you won't have a meeting. They'll be in before then, but it'll be January.
So once we see them in January, let's say we approve one of them.
Yes.
What is the timeline that we would be?
They're gonna tell you. I mean, at that point, they're gonna tell you, hey, based upon the qualifications that you're looking for, we think this search could take up to X amount of time. They're gonna be able to tell you, and maybe they'll tell you a month, and maybe they'll tell you 6 months.
Just to expand on that, because I did talk to 2 of them directly and asked them that exact question, because remember, we were talking about starting this earlier, and they both said you don't want to start this process until about a year before you're ready to hire someone, because it's very likely that we will find someone faster than you're ready, and then you're in a quandary. So both of them suggested starting with a year before to 10 months before is plenty of time to do this.
Which is where we're at right now.
Exactly.
That's
So
exactly
I think
where you'll be.
I think we're right on schedule, according to what these firms that do this all the time have said. Now, the question is, if we're not going to have a meeting until January to look at the responses to the RFQ, does it make any sense maybe to have the ones that responded come to that meeting and talk to us so we don't have to wait until February? Because we're probably going to want to interview personally these people, not just look at a piece of paper. Maybe we can do both things at once at the January meeting.
That's a great idea. I think we need to be prepared for that conversation because it's important to know what our criteria will be.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say. Should at this point, should we start putting together our criteria? So when it comes in January, we kind of know, we have some type of consensus of knowing what we're looking for.
So look at the request for qualifications, see the kinds of things that we put in there in terms of what their qualifications should be, how long they've been in the business, how many managers they've actually located and put in positions, things like that. Think about just kind of the kind of information that you would want to ask of them.
Yeah. But I was actually thinking when I said that we should get together is what criteria we're going to be looking for the manager.
Oh,
so that way we can give them that information in January.
Well, that may be, but to pick them that night and to also tell them all the criteria that you want for the search, I just think it's.
I think that's
you'll be here until 4 or 5 in the morning.
That's a conversation.
Personal research, so you ask pointed questions.
Yeah. Okay. That's a conversation that we have once we identify the firm we're working with and we retain them.
Yeah.
Because we're going to, in order to make the decision, we're going to want them to tell us what they think we need and how they're going to go about finding it for us as part of our selection. When we identify that person, then we'll really get together and hone in on the details.
Yes.
Okay.
Katie.
Katie. Quick question.
Yes.
It's going out tomorrow, correct?
Unless you tell me that you want some change to it,
Okay.
we're planning on.
Assuming it goes
releasing
out tomorrow, if there
Yes.
are people that have responded before our next meeting, would we be able to see those at our next meeting, even if it
Sure.
isn't past the whole time hasn't run?
Can we change the amount of time they can respond? Since you haven't sent it out yet?
Tonight? No. Tell me, you want to make it shorter?
Yes.
So maybe we can get them in before January. We can get
okay.
December 4th.
30 days is not an unreasonable
I know.
time. Not because I don't think people who happen to get it tomorrow, when we mail it to them, couldn't respond in 30 days. But if you want to try to get a broader, a group of people, it may be that somebody doesn't hear about it for some reason for 2 weeks, and they would have responded.
Steve, what I
Is there a
think.
way of getting this information to the people that we want to reach?
Well, they'll
Yes.
do that, but they also.
Yes.
He said he would send it directly, but you also have.
Yeah,
to
there's
an open bidding.
Well, yes, I have
suggesting about letting the world know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Steve, could it be
30 days, it's got to be plenty of time.
during the holidays?
Yeah, I think 30 days is proper time to respond. You're suggesting cutting it shorter than
See
that.
the ones that respond early.
Steve, could we actually maybe, if you have responses by the first of the year, get a packet
Yes, absolutely.
put together, the second or third day of January, so we have it to review before the meeting?
Yes.
Because it's.
Yes, and then you'll be able to be prepared to make a selection in January when when you meet.
I don't think that the Q&A with these responders is quite as adequate as it should be if we're not prepared to anticipate what we want out of them. And that means criteria that we think are important for the next manager. Just receiving incoming from a paid consultant without being able to filter it in accordance with our own standards. So what we're looking for is not a wasteful exercise, but it's not as fully realizable as if we're prepared.
What criteria have we used in the past? Do we have?
None.
No, we
had job descriptions. Of course we did.
No. You guys are talking about two different things.
We are talking about two different things.
You absolutely have criteria and should establish criteria of what you want that search person to go out and find.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
exactly what I'm talking about. I know, but he's talking about something different.
I'm talking about two things at once.
Okay.
We're going to
Which is why we were all confused.
We're going to interview RFQ respondents.
Right.
In doing so, to the best of our ability, we ought to have in mind, at least rudimentarily, what we want them to
For
do.
example, if you want somebody that specializes in bringing managers from outside the United States, then you're going to pick somebody who works outside the United States. Okay, I mean it's a crazy example, but what he's suggesting is as you think about who you want to hire, if there's somebody who only works in the state of Florida or only in Dade County, you may not want to choose them. Maybe your scope should be broader. So think about
Pointed questions
yes,
to get to what we
think about
need.
what you want to know about these people in terms of what you think the search ultimately will be.
Just to clarify a little bit, you're going to find that all four of these firms have a national reach, and that's what they do when they're looking for managers. And it's not just managers, by the way. These firms specialize in staffing high-level positions for municipalities.
That's correct.
And governments. So it's not limited to managers. And they do all have a national reach and a national network. And I think it's more important if we have all four come and interview in front of us, for us to listen to them and have them explain what they do and how they do it and see how we feel about them, other than at that point telling them what we want.
It's right, you're right. But in receiving that information, if you have the ability to filter through where you think you're going to wind up in terms of criteria for a manager, you're going to be better able to assess the suitability of their inputs. That's what I'm saying.
Fair enough. Okay, so that's where we are. Thank you.
Now we're going to talk about trash.
Trash. Okay.
It's been just phrased by
Recycle
a couple of
Recycle bins.
Yeah.
Mayor Lindsay.
So in terms of it, I know we have a new contract with a greening company to see kind of get the low-lying fruit. But in the last couple of months, I've gotten inquiries about additional trash bins and recycle bins throughout the village, about battery recycle bins. And I know there's one in the community center, but it's not always accessible and people don't know about it. I understand that one or two of the malls may be interested in also putting one of our bins in, so to do that. And also the garbage in the dog park. And the lack of enough containers, it's always overflowing. So that's just my
Trash talk.
my trash. Thank you, Gary. And I'm done.
Do we have we actually have recycle bins in the village right now?
In some locations, we don't have them in all of them.
Because my understanding was that the trash goes to a center and is actually split and it's recycled there. So technically, all of our trash bins are recycle bins right now. That's my understanding. I think Todd actually had to drive somebody there to physically show how it worked, and they understood after when they were there.
We had, I'm trying to think how far back it went. But we had D Square at the time come in and give us a complete education process of when a piece of garbage or trash leaves the village of Key Biscayne and where it goes and how it goes. You're right, there is a separation at another location. Mm-hmm. The concern was we've got a blue garbage can and we've got a green garbage can, and we see them throwing everything in the same truck.
Yeah.
And I was being assured that wasn't what was happening.
Okay.
We've dealt with this. We will get back. I didn't know about the dog garbage. I'm sorry.
No, and
that right away. I was aware of the battery container because we actually moved it over during the hurricane because we had more of that. We can have them in each one of the public facilities, and I already wrote down to expand.
Terrific. And in terms of more trash receptacles with recycling receptacles next to each other, there's just a lack of that, and there is a problem with the dog park.
Got it. I didn't know it.
That's it.
Next item, Madam Mayor, is Library Initiative. Vice Mayor Kaplan and Councilmember Petros.
Okay, we had a meeting, I guess it was yesterday, at the library, our current library, with the Miami-Dade director. And Mr. Gilbert was there also, and then he brought his design team, which all of you were given a schematic of a potential design for a new library. I think, it was at the beginning of the summer, if I remember correctly. And it was really just to continue to have conversations of how we could try and reach an agreement with the county in a way that would allow us to put forth a potential diagram and design and a procedure for moving forward on a decision of whether or not we could get a new library for our community. And so at this point, I think we're trying to talk about an interlocal agreement. And if anybody has any specific questions or concerns, please bring it forward now.
Now, is Mr. Baker still discussing the idea of coming up with a financing contract and plan? I understand that is the first step, and there were different models. And what is, do we come up?
He spoke about using the Palmetto Bay model.
Right, and we had, I know that, luckily Chad worked on that very closely. So we could do that very quickly if there is a consensus from council in terms of just coming up with some kind of, framework to start that dialogue and get the momentum going. And I know Chad, was ready, willing, and able to do that a couple months ago, but you all wanted to get your feet wet. But I think that would be a wonderful start to actually, if there's consensus of this council. The idea is, and what worked really well in Palmetto Bay was the library system wants to get work with us to get a new library, but they don't have the capital. So we're willing to finance, they're willing to pay the installments on the debt. And it's something that they've been doing pretty regularly, and they just thought that it was almost a no-brainer.
I think there is some question about whether we would want the product that they would necessarily deliver to our community, and that there's an over and above factor for things that we would want in our community, and then trying to determine what the breakdown is of that.
And do we want to have a public process? Because I think that's where we had a breakdown about 5 years ago when this died, was we were right at this point, and there was a will from the community to weigh in and see what the needs were on the east side of the island, and for that, intellectual cultural center, 21st century library. Is that what you foresee, Katie, is having a public process where people can?
I think there'd definitely be a public process. I think there has to be kind of an agreement on the financing arm of this before we would be able to make the decisions on.
So are you thinking of
components?
Something larger than,
we were thinking more of a 2-story building, which would double the space of
how many
current
square
library.
feet?
About 15,000. I think the current one's 7,500.
And that's, I think, a mid-sized library, according to the library people. That, I thought, was within their plans.
They spoke more about their plans would be to replicate what currently exists as far as what they thought was consistent with community need at this point. I think they were very open to the fact that whatever we put on our island will probably get used very quickly also.
15,000 feet is about what that site will permit. That's it. That's the footprint. Unless we remove the landscaping, which I think we'd be loath to do because it's so beautiful. 15,000 feet is certainly adequate for a library. The question is the ancillary uses that we might want to place within that facility have natural seating constraints. We sort of figured out yesterday that it might be around 110 seats. At the Father Libby Nixon talk, I think there might have been more than 110 people in the room that night. So if we want a larger room to handle lectures and events such as that, we need to back into the intrinsic limitation if we're going to be on that site. Where I think we got to, and our advocacy on this as far as the financing, is that we're not looking for anything extra over and above a library. And this is a tactical position I think that we should take because we want 100% cost share. And our argument is that this library is deficient. It's been under-resourced forever. There's a mutual recognition that it is tawdry and should be replaced. And our argument, and I think we had some traction on being persuasive on this yesterday, is that the resulting product that they drew is nothing more than a library. It's very pretty. The architectural quality of it is something that we need to talk about because it's not exactly emblematic of our prevailing architecture. And there's ways to detail around that and still hold true to the DNA of this thing that they presented. So the methodology that we talked about yesterday is that they have the capability of doing schematic design. They don't have the capability of doing construction drawings. We would inherit schematics if we choose to proceed this way. The cart and horse proposition is they invited us to develop an ILA, which I began working on today. The ILA deals with 100% cost share, as I'm seeing it. We will procure an architect through our regular process to do construction drawings. We will collaborate in the meantime and presumably do some type of public presentation / charrette, which has to include interior needs and programming, which is really the main point here. It's not just books and shelves. We will procure a contractor. We will develop a guaranteed maximum price contract. We will cause that contractor to build it. We will pay for it, and they will pay us back. That's basically the deal.
How does it work? We pay currently somewhere in excess of $2 million.
$2 million, yep.
$2.3 million or $2.4 million, I believe. Will we be able to use that money for our own library?
We've presented that as an idea that we think, first of all, the merit of that is it reduces our cash outlay because we're paying tax anyway. So if we can offset some of that ad valorem contribution, that's better for us. There's a fist in a velvet glove argument, too, that if we can't reach a financing accommodation that's good for us, the question is, the rhetorical question at this point is, why would we continue to pay $2.3 million a year in ad valorem, have a deficient facility, and still have to build our own facility? So if the answer is we would be able to recover that cost over a 30-year amortization period or something like that, that's not a great deal.
No, it isn't.
If the financing terms are better than that, it starts to become a palatable deal. So this is a negotiation.
Well, I asked the question for a reason, because I think as long as we're thinking about this, maybe we should think out of the box a little bit. Because if, in effect, it turns out that we do have $2.3 million to work with, and that's every year, and if, in effect, we could use that money to finance a loan to build not just a library, but a much larger building that would encompass a library and a large meeting room that could be used for presentations and educational, and even a small workshop, a small playhouse that we used to have on the island, and a multi-purpose thing. And if we could find a place to put it, which we might be able to do, then we might be able to accomplish a lot more that this community would really want and need at the same time.
And Gary, that's actually kind of the current model of what's being done in different communities, exactly what you've spoken about. Even in Cutler Bay, they have an outdoor amphitheater that is adjacent to the library, that is next to a community park, kind of like the pond we have out there. And that the idea of having kind of exchanging ideas and exchanging information is the new concept of the library, a little less emphasis on books and more on exchange of ideas and learning.
Sure.
So you're spot on. And I mean, we definitely are a donor community, and they recognize it.
What I was kind of hitting at, and I'll stop hinting, wouldn't this be an incredibly nice thing for the entry block to have as the first thing people see as they enter the village?
A nice library?
A nice, beautiful building, and also something the community uses.
The property the library's on was deeded by Key Colony for the purpose of a library. And it was deeded to Miami-Dade County, but that's just a wrinkle.
The answer is it's possible, and it may be preferable.
Because that's the point. If we do build it there, it's still not our property. I assume they could deed it back to us somehow or another, but we have a much larger piece of property that we might be able to do a lot more with. And that's why I'm saying, as long as we're thinking about this, let's think big and think a little bit out of the box and try to figure out what we would like this to be in addition to a library, if we could do anything we wanted, and then see if there is a feasible way to do it.
Yeah. I don't know whether you and John, Katie, reacted to Ray Baker's email today in the same way I did. He sent us an email apropos of the sort of opt out of the library system and apply our tax revenues to our own facility in a surprising way by sending us an example, at least in my opinion as I read it, of an analogy in Miami-Dade County, which I thought was a good faith proffer, and I appreciated it. So it's something for us to study and think about as an alternative.
We would opt out of Miami-Dade County system completely and have our own system, you're saying?
I say that loosely, but in effect, somehow or another, if it's legal to do so.
Please circulate all that
Yes.
information to all the
But we would
councils.
would we lose some quality of not being in that large system of circulation?
You certainly lose the ability to borrow, because that's intrinsic to the Miami-Dade County Public Library System. In substitution for that, you have a couple of principles. One is the fact that information is more electronic than paper these days. And you know, to be determined is how important is that library-wide, intra-library circulating borrowing capacity, you know, in this community. I don't know the answer to that, but you would certainly lose that.
But if it turned out to be something that's important, we could take some of this ad valorem revenue that we now keep here and possibly give some of it back to the Dade County system to continue to be included in that.
It would be the circulators.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, anything's possible.
Anything is possible.
Here's a Brexit moment. That's a Brexit moment, because I don't know if that's possible, because the parallel in Brexit is you're in or you're out.
Well,
And I think that's probably the answer that we'd hear.
But you could go to Coral Gables Library and register.
But if we're paying some
Not
money
if,
to them.
not if your house is here. Yeah.
These are details. I'm just saying, I think that we ought to take this opportunity
Public school library.
to really expand our thought and try to.
I was told, say it again?
Yeah,
In the pub
yeah.
register.
And location is included in that proposition.
Yes.
Just thinking of
We're not constrained to 15,000 feet if the site is somewhere else. That's it.
All right.
Next,
Oh, so the takeaway is, we're invited to do an ILA. We're working on it. At some point soon, you'll see an ILA in draft.
And I will make sure she has the email that I haven't actually had the chance to look at, and everybody will see it tomorrow.
next item, Madam Mayor, under the village clerk, election of vice mayor election pursuant to section 2.02B of the village charter.
I have a nomination.
Councilmember Moss, okay.
Do we have to, okay. This is always kind of difficult for us because, I mean, all of my colleagues I would love to vote for as a vice mayor. And Frank, you've been an excellent vice mayor, mayor, council member, but the person I want to nominate has not been a vice mayor. Is somebody that's in their first term, their final year in their 4 years. Somebody that I've campaigned with back in 2014. And so I would like to nominate Councilmember De La Cruz.
I would like to nominate Councilmember Vice Mayor Kaplan, if he would be willing to serve another term. And I have a reason for this, and this has nothing to do with whether or not Luis is qualified or should be, because you are and you should. But I think that we're in the middle of some really important things that Frank has been spearheading, and I think that the continuity of him continuing to be vice mayor would be very helpful for that. And I'd like to see this final year us accomplish a lot of things, many, many things. And I don't even know if Frank would be willing to do it again, but if you would, I just think that for the purposes I'm talking about, this would be appropriate at this point.
I'm certainly willing to continue serving. That's all I'm going to say. But.
Okay. Well, listen, in the 7 years that I've been on council, it's been something that individuals have looked forward to. And the tradition has been to share the honor, and everyone works so incredibly hard. We get remunerated so little. To give everybody an opportunity at being vice mayor is just something, and it's just, I'm putting it out there. I can tell you that before Jim passed away, he was made vice mayor, and it meant the world to him. I see, vice mayors. I mean, it's part of the experience, and it's a nice perk, and I think everyone here is worthy of being. I mean, just you work so hard. I just want to put it out there. It's traditionally been passed around.
Are there any other nominations? Is there a second for Councilmember De La Cruz?
Got a second.
Thank you. A second for Vice Mayor Kaplan.
I'm going to second. And what happened?
Now what?
Allison, where are you?
Allison?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm here.
She would be she's in trouble. She's going to have to say who she's voting for.
She would be the tiebreaker, correct?
Well, maybe
I'm
not.
going
Maybe
to agree with
give somebody
Gary
else an
and Katie and go with Frank.
So,
should we write down our name? Or is that?
Congratulations.
Well, are we taking
No,
a vote?
That
I
it?
think we need
That
to
wasn't
take
the
a
vote?
vote.
You don't
Oh,
know
I
what
thought
the
she-
vote is. You
I
don't know
thought
what
she
the vote
broke
is.
it.
She did, but you didn't.
Ah, okay.
oh, not yet. I just want to make sure that.
I haven't voted.
I know you.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody voted.
But I was going to say, why don't we write our vote in?
Let's do that.
Why don't we write? That's what's been done in the
That's
past.
fine. But you know you do have to announce them afterwards, so it's not a secret.
Fine.
I mean, you
There's no
can
point.
write it down, but she's gonna have to disclose who voted which way. It's not a secret ballot.
We have to put our name on it and who we're voting for.
Yes.
All right.
The only one that can't give you a writing is Allison. She's on the telephone.
Right. But she already blew that.
Yeah, I'm texting it to Jenny now.
Right.
Thank you.
Got it. I don't know.
Perfect. I mean, what sense does it make? We already know who's voting for whom.
That's true.
I just think it's nice to get that new business card.
Congratulations, Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Well,
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Next item, Madam Mayor, is
I thank you for nominating Louise. And I thank you for the privilege of serving our council. I will do my best.
thank you. Next item, proposed 2018 Village Council meeting schedule. And what I did was I just drafted to give this a try, see if everyone is in agreement with it. I don't know if everyone had the opportunity to review the dates.
Tab is this 9?
This would be the last tab, correct?
Do you need a motion to approve this?
Yes, if everyone is in agreement with the dates.
The dates.
The only thing that I saw was number 10, June 26th. It doesn't matter for me. I'm going to be here, but it is I think that it's on the, no, that is the third. Is that the third?
Tuesday.
That is the third Tuesday?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Never mind. It's fine then.
I'm sorry, the fourth, wait, the fourth. Give me 1 second.
We always do it on the 2nd and the 4th, right? So we're okay.
Yes, the 2nd.
Okay, never mind. We're fine. I'm fine with it.
Well, I'll move to approve it.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, exactly 10 o'clock, so the manager's report.
Jenny, just to get back, and this is
I'm
got to
sorry.
do with schedules, what are we going to do about our December meeting? Do we have any?
There's a motion on the table that the ordinance on second reading, so that would have to be brought back.
Yes.
And at that point, I guess we can discuss it. There's
Haven't
nothing.
gotten an answer yet?
I tried to call Mr. Cooper. I did not get through. I've got nothing. My indication was that there was a meeting in Surfside on November 2nd.
I looked through all my emails. We got maybe for the first 4 meetings of the year. And that was it in terms of.
The November one
advance.
is the last one I have.
Could we?
Yeah, no, you don't get, there's nothing in writing.
May I suggest this? Jennifer knows this full well. If we're hosting, we've gone through this before, we would be making preparations by now. Are we? We're not making preparations, are we?
We are hosting. They reached out to me and to administration. He mentioned something at the ethics training last Friday. His staff is working directly with the restaurant because they've done it so many times. So we're not actually doing the preparations. They are. They're just haven't been great about communicating.
They requested of us a financial commitment, which we
Correct.
gave them, and everything else, as you remember, is being taken care of by.
They do it.
But we really think this is December 7th, and it's not within our we're not actually working on it?
Have a position on
You want to call the Grand Bay and ask them if they, why don't we call the Grand Bay, because that's where it is.
Would it be an issue to do the Tuesday after on the 12th?
Yeah, I was wondering that.
And just stay away from Thursday since we don't know which Thursday it
That's fine
might
with
be?
me.
That's fine with me.
How about that?
Tuesday the 12th.
Is that fine with you too?
Sure.
Luis, is that
We
okay
have the
with you?
12th.
Tuesday what?
Which is the
December
second,
12th.
which is the second Tuesday of typically when we have our
Which is our
meetings
normal
anyways.
time.
Yeah,
There's no such thing as a
just get it out of the way.
It's our semi.
Yeah, and then you can get the kiteboarding stuff ready for us for December 12th. It's a little bit faster. I mean, you have a little bit more time.
He won't have to pull an all-nighter on
I'm
that.
gonna actually pick
An
the
extra
spot
week.
and everything by then.
As long as I can get one of those stringers.
Right, you get one.
Streamer?
See, anybody
Streamer,
on
yeah, the
council,
streamer.
Streamer.
You are a level 3 if you're on the council.
No, thank you.
And we can teach people, right?
Not even a jest. I'll be sitting on the sand with Don Ellisberg.
Under a big umbrella.
Okay.
I'm sorry, there was a motion to table the ordinance for the, if I can have someone.
I
So I move to,
Yeah, to take it off
Second.
the table.
Thank
and
you.
to, discuss, for discussion.
No, actually, it was just to
A
table
date.
to
To
arrive at
defer.
a date, so.
So December,
There's a
Discussion on the
motion,
date.
right, there's
The
just there was a motion to defer, it was tabled because you didn't have a date. So now we have,
Certain.
So I have to make a motion for December 12th or no?
I can take it as a consensus of council that
Yes.
December 12th.
Yes.
So the second reading of this ordinance will take place Tuesday, December 12th, 2017. So the record reflects that. And now the next item is under the manager's report. Status update on acquisition of 571 Glen Ridge Road and 570 Fernwood Road. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Manager?
I'm sorry. I have nothing to add. In fairness, Mario did a very good job of presenting. We did, in fact, at council's recommendation, the village's appraiser and the Ledbetter Gamwell appraiser did on the phone with me in the room and with Mario try and work out some of these concerns that the appraisal didn't go far enough. We left it that the two of them would continue to work through it. The document that you received this morning was the document that I received from Mario regarding where they're at and the number that they're at. I am in full support of this acquisition, but I think it's a policy decision. That's just how much we're going to offer them as in respect. But I am in full support of this. After watching this, listening to this, and the community input, I hope that you got the same letters that I did. There is strong support for these two pieces of property to be made into something that the village can be proud of. So that's all I have to say. Mario did an excellent job of presenting.
Mario, you did, and I think it's no secret. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and we also feel a responsibility to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars and paying the right price for it. And so I did receive the letter from Mario. The offer was at 1.8 for each piece of property. And so I went back to see, because the properties were listed at one point, and I found that the Glenridge property, the last time it was listed for $1,799, and the market arguably was a little stronger back then. So I have a problem paying above asking price for the last asking price. And I think it's reasonable to think that there's going to be a commission off of approximately $100,000. That's a little less than 6%. And that, people dicker with the price and don't always pay full asking, or in fact, it would have sold, because if you offer asking price without any contingencies, you are in contract and you need to sell your property. So I believe, is that, if you come in with no considerations, does someone have to? But anyway,
Look,
so to me, the issue is the price.
Beyond this particular issue, I just can't even believe that we would be thinking to pay so much above the market value for properties right now.
So the point is, what is the right price for us? And I don't think 180 is.
I spoke to our appraiser today, because I wanted to find out for myself the story, and he told me that that in his opinion the properties aren't worth much above $1.3 million each. So I don't mind paying a little bit more, because I understand that to us those two properties are probably worth more than to the average person, but $500,000 for each over what the market value is, I think that's a breach of our fiduciary duty. That's the way I see it. I would definitely be for it if it was close to reasonable, but I think that's unreasonable, with all due respect.
Brett, and then Frank.
Mario, how motivated are they to sell their property?
What are you willing to pay?
The motivation depends on the price.
And
so
that's what we'll. At 1.8, you'll get a deed tomorrow.
Forget the city. How motivated are they to sell it to somebody?
I would say
private developer come in, want to buy it to build a house.
Both parties, certainly neither party's under distress, let's say. It's not like they're in a situation, either one of them, that they need to sell. Gambles have been living there for a while, and every expectation is, that they will continue to live there. The Ledbetters, after having used it for their own residence for a long time, are now renting it out. And they're under no sort of pressure to sell, but at the same time, the Ledbetters in particular, I don't think are going to be waiting around forever either to make a deal with the village. They could very well put it on the market and see.
But it's going to be much lower on the market, because there is no other. You might correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no other person that can be assembling properties in this zone. It's not
especially in that
it's
in
not,
that area.
Yeah, it's not the same as if you're in downtown, in some neighborhood in Miami that has high rises where developers are going in there and trying to buy up rows of houses in order to build. And they're saying, well, my property's worth more because there's an assemblage. And if you want it, then, that's the market. But there's no other people that are.
I would agree with you that the assemblage is really, in this matter, in this case, only important to the village. The fact
It
of being
is.
able to
So
get these
if the village is not in there, the 1.8 is not 1.8 anymore very quickly. So I was just wondering how motivated are they to sell, not to us, but to anybody.
I would say that they have, as I mentioned, staying power. They're not necessarily going to, if this deal doesn't come together, both parties put it on the market and sell it for whatever price they can get. They'll probably be sticking around for some time.
Okay.
Yes, Frank.
Thank you. I think there are two questions, at least. It starts with what these properties are valued at in the market, because we need to bench our purchasing decisions on market. But the second question is, what's it worth to us? And that's actually the more critical question to me. Earlier, Mario mentioned 4 predicates that have caused the appraisals to be, in Mario's estimation, impertinent to this opportunity. One is the accretive value of the assemblage, which is only a principle that's applicable to us, really, practically. The other, which I think is correct, is the degradation in value in standard appraisal world, because it's close to the school, which is probably an accretive value proposition for us, counter market. The third and the fourth, I think, are just intrinsic in any municipal purchase. The open space concurrency deficit is just it's like our oxygen. We've lived with this for our entire village existence. And yes, we're always trying to reduce the deficit. It's an evergreen aspiration. And the other is always relevant as well. We had the discussion when the Village Green was under debate for years. It's the opportunity cost of not doing something. What happens if we don't? Well, what happens here if we don't is it's presumably 2 single-family residences instead of a municipal open space area for whatever purpose we choose to design it as that's proximate to the school and close to the municipal center. So those are all value propositions to me, and at least 2 of them are counter appraisal methodology. What I don't want to do is repeat the Ed London negotiate on the turf grass vendor, and I don't want to do that ever again. Yeah. So I don't want to try to sit here and back into the calculus of what the right price is, but I think that that's how I see the challenge before us to come to what is the value to us. And it's not really, it starts with an understanding of what the appraised value is, but it doesn't end there, as I see it.
Well, and so our next step possibly is to each of us contact our village manager with what we think is the price. And if there is consensus, we can, no? What do you think, Steve? You tell me.
No.
What's the next thing?
I don't think that you can't do this by polling and sort of him figuring out what you want and figure out the average or something like that. I think that if there's a desire to purchase this and somebody believes they have a good understanding or feeling for what they think it's worth, you all should discuss it, put it out there, and see if you can come to a consensus.
That's exactly what I was going to say, but
it's not a negotiation. It's not a in other words, it's not an end London situation. We're not saying to Mario, do we have a deal? And we're going back and forth.
This is really not a legal decision.
No, it's not a legal decision.
This is,
right.
Yes.
Here's 2 simple questions.
Yes.
Number 1, does everyone up here think that at the right price we should buy this property?
I have one. The answer is a qualified yes for me.
It would always be qualified for me.
I'm sorry for doing it, but you mentioned it earlier.
I mean, it's under the right price.
The entry block.
Huh?
The entry block.
What's that?
The entry block.
What about it? That doesn't have anything to do with these properties.
I think that in the world of competing priorities, there's always the possibility that we can't do everything.
Well, that's true. There's no question about that.
I think that's happening.
But at this particular point, maybe what we ought to do is explore the concept that we talked about before of making a much larger and more multi-purpose library-type facility and possibly putting it there. Because you see, I think they're different. And
Talking about the two properties.
Okay,
Yes, I think.
can we focus on these two properties? Okay.
I'm just trying to respond to what Frank said.
Okay.
Because in effect, if we decide to do this at the entry block, it's going to be self-funding. Because the money that we're going to get from the ad valorem tax that we're now paying to the county will fund plenty enough money to buy the property and build the building without us having to outlay
It
anything.
still has the same egress and egress problem that it's always had. So, I mean, the
Well, it
entry
might,
block is not,
but-
it's not a user-friendly property.
That's a concern.
I'm
And
not
we
saying that we shouldn't buy it for some other reason, but I mean, I'm not sure that the library is.
Property you're talking about?
The entry.
Well, let's get back to this property, and I think you're right. Let's get back. So maybe there's a question right now as to whether we all really think we should even buy this property. If there is, then the price doesn't matter. And what I was going to get at is if everybody feels like we should buy it at the right price, then let's just decide what the right price is. And it's not negotiating against ourselves, it's negotiating with ourselves.
Correct. And Katie, yes.
A factor that we should keep in mind too is when we purchase land as a village and it becomes open space, we have the potential to get grant money, which we did on West Heather.
How do you feel about this? Do you think that it should be purchased no matter what, or purchased at the right price, or not purchased? Brett, I'm raising Gary's questions because I want to get
like
some.
the idea of the location. I would hope that it could be a little bit larger at some point. So I would be willing to take a serious look at it if it was at the right price. And I don't buy this is more valuable to you, so I'm going to bump up the price to you. I mean, there's a market value out there of what they can sell it for to anybody. And that's it. I mean, they can sit and wait and sell it to a private person, but it won't be at that price, or it's going to be a long wait. We could offer something, maybe a little bit more since we have an opportunity, but we should decide what that extra opportunity and not have them to tell us that it's $1 million more.
I would like to, I'd like to suggest, I want to think about our financing needs this year. Some of them are assured and some of them are contingent. I'm prepared to do this in public, but not right now. I want to think about, I do believe what I said about value. It's value to us.
Sure.
But there are competing priorities in my mind. And I don't think in 2018 we're going to do every single one of them.
We never do.
We're still waiting for the parking lot.
And
We're close.
we're close. We're close. A little closer than we were about 6 hours ago.
Yes.
But, you know, this is exactly why we have a land acquisition fund that is restricted.
That's right.
This is exactly why. And I think it's an opportunity.
If the question is whether this opportunity falls squarely in our target, the evergreen target that we've had, you know, on our top of priority list forever, the answer is yes, it does. So my qualified interest in this is qualified by what I said, but I think we need to decide what we want to pay for this. And if they accept that, maybe we can make a deal. If they don't accept it, you know, there's always horse trading, but it's up to two parties to make a deal.
And it should be a win-win for both parties.
That's right.
Right? And right now we know what the market price is. Everybody knows what the market price is. It will be a win for them, but it has to be a win for us as well. So we need to come to what we think is the right price.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've read all this. I think the appraisals are, or at least the appraisal that I remember reading the last time that we had a presentation on this was probably correct. I think the ask price is high, plainly high. But I think the appraisal price doesn't, as for the reasons that Mario mentioned. I agree with his articulation of why there's a higher value. So we gotta do this.
So what are we doing?
We're gonna come back and.
Wait,
I would like to
wait.
propose a counteroffer.
Okay, Gary?
We have an offer to sell to us. I'd like to propose a counteroffer. And I think the counteroffer, in my mind, which would be a fair price for us, considering what we would use it for, would be $1,450,000 for each lot.
I could support that.
What did you say?
$1,450,000.
Sounds more reasonable.
So why don't you poll, Gary just came up with a number, Myra thinks it's a good number. If we're gonna have a counteroffer, we
Can I
need to have consensus on it.
Yes,
That's right.
that's right.
Gary, so you can make the motion for 145, correct?
I would make the motion that we.
A second?
I second that motion.
Should I do a roll call or?
Motion? I mean.
Yeah, because we need to decide whether we want a counteroffer at this price for both lots.
I'll do a
Roll
roll call.
Okay,
Vice, this is for 1.45?
correct.
On both properties, 570 and 571, correct?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kaplan,
Yes.
Councilmember De La Cruz,
Well, I still think it's too high, but, you know, if it's going to be a unanimous, I'll say yes.
You made it contingent on the unanimous.
Right.
It's going to be unanimous. I like that one.
I like that vote.
Skip me.
My arm is twisted all the way here, Lucho.
What did she say?
Her arm is
I
twisted.
said I could feel my arm being twisted all the way.
Councilmember Gross,
Yes.
Mayor Lindsay,
Yes.
Councilmember McCormick,
Yes.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Yes.
Again.
Motion carries.
Okay, so you have a counteroffer. Get back to us.
Yep.
Motion to
Motion to adjourn.
adjourn?
Meeting is adjourned. Have a good week.
Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.